12 noon. I wish to welcome everyone to the Superintendent's Workshop being held at the Joe N. Idlet Junior TEC. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with board members, please give that to our Executive Assistant, Mrs. Morey. We'll take a break at 2 hours if we need that, and I'd also like to welcome Ms. Berenborg on our team. So thank you very much. Purpose of the Superintendent's Workshop, I would like to recognize the Superintendent to explain the purpose of the workshop. The floor is yours.
Madam Chair, sorry.
Yes.
Point of order. I'd like to add something to discussion, please, for us.
Okay, just under the board discussion. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Just board discussion.
Sure.
The joint work group, this is what I'm calling it, joint work group school board appointee.
Thank you.
And the second item is the superintendent contract. Thank you.
Okay, that's right. I have a discussion. Make sure I don't forget those. 1,
Appreciate it.
B, and C. Thank you very much. Okay. I'd like to recognize the Superintendent to explain the purpose of the workshop. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam
Vice
Chair. The intent of this workshop is to present items to the school board that will ultimately come before the board for approval in an upcoming business meeting. The first 2 items will be presented by Ms. Shields.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm here to present on the purchase of the Knowledge Pillars certification exams. Knowledge Pillars provides industry-leading practice and certification exams for both K-12 and college-level students, as well as industry professionals. Several of our CTE programs utilize Knowledge Pillars exams, including digital information technology, digital design, business management, computer science, promotional enterprise, and web development. The quote includes unlimited practice, lab access, and curriculum for each student. The curriculum is tied specifically to the industry certification test only. The purchase allows students to take any test on the CAPE list provided by Knowledge Pillars. If students are unsuccessful in their first attempt, they are allowed 2 retakes. Through the Career and Professional Education Act, otherwise known as CAPE, the CTE program earns approximately $500 for each student who passes a .1 test and approximately $1,000 for each student who passes a .2 test. Knowledge Pillars has been pivotal in our industry certification exam success for 23-24. Between the 2 high schools, we had 1,063 Knowledge Pillar industry certifications earned.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions or comments? Just one comment, Ms. Shield. First of all, thank you. This is great information. And I don't know if this ties in exactly, but Mr. Erickson just got a grant working with our nursing programs, if you will, at the high schools for their career pathways. Do you know anything about that, or could you explain that a little bit more?
I do. So we were recently awarded 2 PCOG grants, and those are for 2 pre-apprenticeship programs that we've embedded at Vero Beach High School and Sebastian River High School for our nursing assistant programs. So this is going to allow those programs to purchase some new equipment that they've much needed. And it also creates another pathway so that those students who finish the nursing assistant program will also leave with a pre-apprenticeship certification from DOE, and it will allow them to articulate into a practical nursing apprenticeship.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to that. And I love the last line on this presentation. There's no direct cost impact as funds used are from bonus FTE dollars earned by students passing the exams. Always love that as a high school principal, too.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, board members? Okay.
All right, so I also have the next item. This is a very exciting item, and I will be presenting on the purchase of a Tesla Model 3 electric training vehicle and high voltage safety trainer for the Sebastian River High School Automotive Program. This purchase is being funded through the Workforce Development Capitalization Incentive Grant. The grant was awarded in April of 2024 for approximately, or a little bit over $1.9 million to upgrade and renovate the Sebastian River High School automotive shop and classroom. The trainer that's being purchased mirrors what is found in today's electric vehicles, minus the risk. So it allows students to test and diagnose critical safety features and reinforce concepts. The interactive demonstration electric vehicle has a cutaway hood, back doors, roof, and seats, so students can see the vehicle's working components. It has transparent covers and lights, and there is no lithium cells present, so it is safe. All of the 12-volt systems are fully functional, including electric steering, accessory systems, lighting, the Model 3 touchscreen interface, and as well as the Tesla service mode is functional, and that provides technician-level data. It also includes a touchscreen tablet with EV operation simulator, which allows the instructor to set up simulations for what he would like to demonstrate. And then finally, this trainer will help students prepare for the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence Electrical Electronic Systems and Light-Duty Hybrid Electric Vehicle Specialist Certification Tests.
Thank you. Any comments, board members? Ms. Rosario?
I'm super excited about this. I think you needed to hype this one up a little bit more.
This is a great thing, and to my knowledge, we are one of the only high schools in Florida who will have one of these.
Yeah.
I think there is one other high school who's in the process of purchasing one.
Like, that's what I was kind of getting at, because we really need to highlight that we are two in the state of Florida, you
Right.
just mentioned, that received this grant and are going to have this Tesla car. Tesla, right?
Yes, Tesla Model
I
3.
got to make sure I get it correct. And that this model is really a simulation to allow students to actually do electronic work with it.
Right.
Totally not in my wheelhouse, but I'm so excited about it. I mean, I know board members received the handout, the packet that you gave us. It would be fantastic if we had it on the screen to be able to show and highlight to the community, because this is an opportunity for kids in this particular field. I'm not sure that they would get it anyplace else. And so it's really, really, I just
Very
can't wait.
exciting,
So when
yes.
are we expecting to actually have it in and set up and ready to go?
It will probably be delivered in April,
Oh,
because it does take some time to produce
so
these
will it
vehicles.
be fully implemented next fall? Or will there
Might
be
be
some
able-
time?
It's possible in May. Once the vehicle is delivered, it's expected in April or the beginning of May.
Ms. Becerra's going to allow us to use hers.
Yeah.
In the meantime. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly.
But yes, this is a big deal, and I think we should celebrate this and maybe have some type of welcoming ceremony for the electric vehicle when it arrives.
So I didn't know when you first presented it what to ask, because I'm just like, I don't even know what to ask with something like this. But one of the things that I understand is a real issue in this particular area is that there aren't enough technicians around to fix the actual standalone, what are they called? Chargers that are at specific locations, like at, charging stations. When people go on long drives, you look for the charging stations. If those charging stations, if there's something wrong with them, there aren't enough technicians who know how to fix it. And so my question to you is, not only are the students going to get hands-on experience with the car, but will they get training for those types of things too?
They
Or
will
is
not
that
get-
separate and apart?
That's separate. They will not get training on the chargers. This, because there is no lithium batteries present, there is not a charger with it.
Right.
So that's a separate training.
That might be something to look into for the future too. Because there is certainly a need in the industry, in this industry, for that. So maybe we could be the first high school to actually give students
To have both?
certification in whatever that is called.
Right.
Okay, Thank you for
Ms.
that.
McDonald?
Yeah, I would like to echo that. Actually, I think it's, as I said before, we don't have a lot of big corporate headquarters here. So those kinds of jobs, if we train kids to go to college, they may not be able to come back here, but this is an excellent kind of job that fills a need. Here in the Treasure Coast particularly, there are a lot of Teslas here in our county and in the surrounding counties, and to provide those services are important, to provide those job opportunities for students to be able to stay in the neighborhood, I think is important. And I didn't know it was the one of only two in the state, but that's particularly impressive. I think that we basically are going to service the whole east coast of Florida, it sounds like.
I hope so.
If I can
Thank
piggyback
you.
off of that.
Yes, go ahead.
If I could piggyback off of that, I mean, this might be something that we can tap into Elon Musk, send him an email, phone call, or something. You never know if, out of generosity, being the second school in the entire state of Florida, he might actually show up with a nice check, or some other kind of grant to help us implement this fully. You never know.
Thank
That would be
you.
amazing.
Dr. Posca?
Yeah, I just want to point out and draw, attention to the fact that this is a continuation of our commitment and ability to provide cutting-edge education with less, and I think if parents have been walking into schools and seeing the changes in their libraries and their technical stations and now this new automotive certification they can get, I think it really shows to them our commitment and dedication to providing the best education we can, and then on top of that, doing it with less resources than most districts.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg? Sorry, I just want to make sure I connect with you if you hear us.
Thank you. No, I got an update on it, and it's an awesome program that I'm excited for our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shields, I remember the NATEF certification for automotive before, but what was the name of this certification one more time, please?
So this one is the Electrical, Electronic Systems, and Light-Duty Hybrid Electric Vehicle Specialist certifications.
And when we look at our students who may choose to go on to college or technical school or anything, this kind of certificate will help them get a good position, 100%. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right, the next item is an update regarding the last year of the 5-year district strategic plan. There's a very brief presentation, if they could bring it up now. And as this item comes up, I'll remind the board, we are in the final year of a 5-year strategic plan. This was a very bold and courageous plan that was approved going on 5 years now. It is a system that we have really used to drive the work of continuous improvement. This strategic plan, the board's strategic plan, has yielded a result. For the last 3 academic years, the school district of Indian River County has been the most improved school system in the state of Florida. So we continue to outpace all other 66 districts. And this is the blueprint in which drives my work and cabinet's work. We are in our final year of the strategic plan, and this has become, for us, a fluid document. Although we want to finish out this specific plan, there are key initiatives that we're working on this specific year that we want to incorporate into our strategic plan. Additionally, not in this presentation, but you recall as we go through this annual process each year, we modify some of the targets. We have shifted away, for the most part, from state rankings and going to overall growth from the previous school year. So there are different examples as we take the board's feedback to incorporate into what will be the last year of this plan. Today is the opportunity to get some feedback regarding this final year and to give you an update on what strategically we're doing in order to ensure that we hit our outcomes. I'm going to speak in 3 basic buckets today: the instructional and programmatic innovation, sustained instructional improvements, and then a major initiative for us this year, which overlaps the entire organization, which is creating a culture of service. When you're looking at instructional program innovations, we are in the last year, as I've said, but under the leadership of this board, we've pushed out some very strategic initiatives that we believe need to be incorporated into the 5th year of this strategic plan. That is around innovation. Very, very specifically, Dodgertown Elementary School creating the STEAM and STEAM Park initiative, really beginning to take a school choice initiative that we've put into place 4 years ago and provide a great deal of support and development, so as a school of choice, it can attract students to go to that school, both students outside of its boundaries, as well as families who currently reside within that boundaries. We are bringing to the board next month, which is October. That has arrived very quickly, October. But this is the Pelican Island Classical Magnet School K-8. We're very excited to bring that information back to the board, ultimately seeking approval to take the next steps around that area of innovation. Great deal of buzz and energy at the school site, in the community, and we'll be excited to bring that update. But because we're doing it, and we weren't thinking about that 4 years ago, this is something we want to incorporate into this final year of the strategic plan, meaning we'll create metrics and monitor and evaluate the impact of both the Dodgertown innovation as well as Pelican Island. We want to continue to grow the Gifford Middle School Advanced Academic Studies. That program has naturally taken off. It has drastically shifted the reality at Dodgertown, and it really has, for me, proven as a proof of concept regarding if you're very specific and you focus in on the areas of innovation at a specific school, schools of choice absolutely work. And then job-embedded professional learning to support initiatives. So we just don't create these initiatives and onboard them and say, here you are, good luck school. We create a way of work over the course of this specific year on training. These are very intentional methods of instruction that we will be providing support and development. So we need to hold ourselves accountable to ensuring it's just not opening or changing a school name or opening a new initiative, but we've done the forework in order to ensure when we open, we will in fact be successful. So within these specific areas, as the strategic plan comes to you for final approval, you'll see shifts and modifications around these areas of innovation embedded into the plan. Also around sustained instructional improvements. So as we celebrate the rate of improvement over the last 3 years, we have been extremely intentional in communicating to our community that we need to expand the innovation, the choice, and really work from the forefront around what innovation in school, the state of Florida honestly looks like. Meaning we are going to, as we create the next strategic plan, question bell configurations, question the configuration of grade levels that we put together, stop times, you know that's coming, but the length of time or the integration of different curriculums. Who says you have to teach math, then teach reading, then teach language arts? Can you integrate those things, which is more representative to the real world in which we're preparing students for? As we move into that, we want to continue to sustain the instructional practices that we've already have developed. We want to make sure that we can sustain those while at the same time move some energy, human capital over to the innovation side. Some of the things that you'll see coming into that plan, shifts from teacher assignments, from teachers on assignment to content specialist. That is an intentional shift within Ms. Becerra's area of responsibility, looking at teachers on a special assignment. They are content experts, they are master coaches, and really using them to help build the capacity within specific content areas for our principals and assistant principals, really transferring some of that key knowledge and expertise to our school site leaders in order to continue to see that to grow. Empowering education in 7th grade mathematics. We're 2 or 3 in middle school acceleration, which is basically algebra and geometry, high school courses in the middle school experience. We want to continue to grow that. We want to grow the number of students who are participating in those particular courses. That initiative will allow us to do that. Micro-credentialing for algebra teachers. You have experienced significant improvements in Algebra 1 in 9th grade. Those are all level 1 or level 2 students walking into Algebra 1 based on the initiative of accelerating our 3, 4s, and 5s in the middle school space. You've seen drastic improvements, but we want to continue to be very, very specific in those areas of algebra, focusing in our high schools because those students need to grow so much in order to pass that assessment. The growth in algebra in high school has been absolutely tremendous, but we want to continue to grow it. We're not where we want to be yet, although we are growing leaps and bounds. Job-embedded professional learning for our civics teachers. We have a team going to Martin County next week, or is it this week? Tomorrow, okay. Really to look at what they do, that's the only area in which they outperform us. One of the reasons for that is they have 8th graders taking civics, which I think is absolutely not acceptable at all. You want to expose those students to it when they're supposed to be exposed to it and not game the system, and that's gaming the system. Our students take civics in 7th grade, so really enhancing that experience, more debate, more discourse, more interaction, really bringing civics to life in those classrooms is a key area. And then a big initiative is the art of problem solving, which is really focusing how we as a system support principals and ensure that the problem solving is happening as close as kids as possible. So a big piece of our success over the last 4 years has been, in fact, the art of problem solving. How we as an organization, from my office, problem solve, identify what is the biggest barrier that has the most influence on solving all other barriers or obstacles. And then problem solving that, creating strategic plans, and holding everyone accountable for the implementation. Those are all skills that I learned as a principal and had very similar results as a principal. So ensuring that we have that system in place. All of this really is readiness as we move into next year's strategic plan. So ensuring all of our leadership teams are problem solving at the absolute highest level will continue our success that we've experienced for the last several years. And we should have changed the batteries before. Oh, I'm not even really. And then a service of culture, and this is something that's been very near and dear to my heart leading into this upcoming school year. So we have challenged the entire system in their KPIs, how they're evaluated will be around service. We have a program Wednesday in which our district leaders, our district leadership team, will come in and they will hear the initiatives of all of the cabinet members' area of service. And it is holding ourselves accountable, not to an outcome, but to ensuring the service that we're providing is building capacity. It is limiting the amount of time that a school site principal or assistant principal is away from being in a classroom. It has, just in the last 3 months that we've been focusing on it, drastically shifted accountability to the service that we're providing. And you want to move at the speed that we want to move as a school system. This is a key initiative to ensure that we are holding ourselves accountable. We're evaluating ourselves around that. It is seeking input and feedback from our principals, from our instructional coaches, in terms of what we are doing, and is it having an impact? And if not, in real time, we have to modify it or change it in order to ensure continuous improvement. Those are key areas that we are incorporating into the strategic plan. Really strategies. Some of them will include targets that I discussed at the beginning. This is the opportunity to get some feedback from board members, if there is any. As a reminder, we will begin November, a monthly conversation around the creation of what will be our blueprint, our driving force for the next 5 years, which is the creation of the 2630 school plan, school improvement, what do you call this thing? Strategic plan, which is absolutely going to drive us and ensure that we solidify ourselves as the top performing school district in the state of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. We'll start with Dr. Posca. Any questions or comments?
I thank you for the presentation. I mean, we've had many discussions about this privately, and I'm looking forward to discussing kind of how we can continue to build on our prior strategic plan and move forward.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Just always impressed with what you produce and provide. Very happy to see you showing flexibility in changing and adjusting in the way we look at things and the things that we try and achieve, and what you're focusing on, the skills you're focusing on. Particularly happy and pleased to see the focus of culture of service, that we don't lose sight of the fact that we are sort of a business in the position of providing a service to parents through their children, and if we don't lose sight of that, we will do a much better job at achieving that. So I'm very happy to see that and look forward to seeing you very successful at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg. Any additions?
Yeah, thank you for this update and asking for board member feedback. one thing that I want us to look at and consider is, sometimes we lose a lot of students when they progress from 5th grade to 6th grade because of moving from elementary into middle school, or people choose charter school because it's K-8 instead. So that's something I want to look at, is that that middle school, are we losing kids, and what can we do to fix that? And also the concern parents have about, the number of problems kids have in middle school. And that comes from kids coming from different elementary schools kind of mixing together. So I'd like us to look at that as well.
So just a real quick.
Yes.
So we lost 47 students from 5th to 6th grade this school year, and we lost 49 students going from 8th to 9th.
Okay.
That is a validation to the work that we're
Right.
already doing.
That's good enough.
Which is K-8s. We know as we are starting with one K-8, but as we come back in October, we need to have additional conversations, need the support and leadership of this board, but there is a key opportunity really to look at the grade configurations to stop some of that particular bleeding. And same thing with that boutique high school, losing 49 students from 8th to 9th. We really, as we problem solve that, are looking at just the opportunity to have small learning environments and unique learning environments in the 9-12 space is something that we know we need to fill. Overall, in terms of enrollment, although I'm saying we lost 47 in 5th to 6th and 49 from 8th to 9th, our enrollment, we hit almost perfectly the number of students that we anticipated having. So unlike Martin County, who had 700 fewer students show up than anticipated. That's tragic because you have to justify or rebuild your schedules because you're only going to get funded for the students that show up, not the ones you project to show up. So we are able to go through that process and balance with enrollment. We're maintaining enrollment from last school year to this school year, which doesn't seem to be the norm across the state.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario?
So, Dr. Moore, is this a presentation that you're providing for us as an informational session, what you're wanting to do, or is this it? Are these the final recommendations for the strategic plan?
So those are key areas that we have been working on over the course of the year. Annual targets may be modified for those. Overarching, everything I spoke about are actually strategies, how I'm going to hit the actual targets in order to conclude the plan. But the intent of this is in fact feedback.
Okay, so this is one of those examples that I have talked about preparing board in advance before so that we can come with questions. So seeing this for the first time doesn't allow the board to have detailed responses to all of the things that you've provided, which seem great. But the strategic plan should be the board's strategic plan, working in collaboration with you. So I would ask that we have a follow-up workshop where we can actually have time to digest this, and maybe there are other things that we can actually come to the table with, like you mentioned, the boutique high school. I didn't see that on there. Alternative, I didn't see tech or vocational education, a focus on that. Like I didn't see some of these other things that we have talked about over time. And I'd really like to have more conversations. Something else that we've talked about is like more of a college and career kind of prep something or other. I'm, again, not having these in-depth conversations or not allowing us the time to have them. We can't actually get there until we do. So I just think that we need to have a workshop for just this where the board is prepared to ask questions and maybe provide more feedback to add to the development of the board's strategic plan in collaboration with you and your team.
So I think most of what you said is what we will be doing on a monthly basis to create the 26 through 30 strategic plan. This strategic plan was created 5 years ago. It drives my work. In terms of the day-to-day operations and the specific strategies to hit those annual targets, that's the work that the team does. And what I'm asking for here is, in this final year, is there anything else that have not captured to close out the 2024 strategic plan, 24-25 strategic plan. Now, I agree, as we create the new strategic plan, the grade configurations, that is significant conversation that needs to take place. All of that needs to take place. I didn't want to be disingenuous and not include the two initiatives that we collectively, literally under the leadership of this board, which is the K-8 classical school as well as the Dodgertown, not to include that or hold me accountable for implementing those two board initiatives would be disingenuous. So that's why I incorporated those two things. Some of the service initiatives really is how I'm going to make sure that the totality of the system hits the target. So I think we're saying the same thing.
So so some of the things that I didn't see up there were things like communication, reaching out to parents, having more parental workshops and training sessions for parents. I didn't see some of these other things that we have in our current strategic plan. And so that's why I was asking, is this going to come back to us again? Because discipline wasn't on there. You know, some of the things in terms of reaching, we have to do much better in terms of closing the gap specifically with our African-American student population and our students with disabilities population. I mean, there's a tremendous academic gap there. Some of these other things were not in there. I see you're shaking your head. And so I'm kind of wondering, I see that you're presenting it, but I'm not sure where all these other things come in.
So we're saying the same thing, a completely different way.
Okay.
I wanted to present the information that would be different to avoid, oh my gosh, Dr. Moore, I haven't seen any of this. I can't approve this. This is the first time we've been taught, this strategic plan is in its 5th year, and we haven't spoke about these initiatives in which I just presented.
Right.
Those other initiatives, every single one that you said, the discipline, the safety, all of that, the way of work has been established, and we're going to continue those structures. So as you look at that, you're not going to see anything that's going to say, well, wait a minute, we never spoke about
Okay,
that.
okay.
It's just a continuation of that plan.
Got it. So now
So
I
that does make
understand.
sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
so now I
And-
understand. So these are the new kind, like the classical, like you mentioned the classical. So the classical is going to be added for this particular year, closing out this year, and then going into the following year, we'll still work on that.
Correct. And the second part of your question is this comes back in October for a workshop and then final approval by the board at the end of October. So just in closing out this specific year.
This one.
We will now go back, incorporate this feedback with the other things that we have been doing for 4 years that the board is fully aware of, that is very, very successful, and then present that, workshop it with you, get some final feedback, bring it back in October.
Okay. And then, thank you for that clarification. And then when are we going to approve the final recommendations for the classical?
October board meeting, as scheduled.
October board meeting as scheduled?
Yes.
Okay. And will we receive, I don't know what you're planning to present. Is there going to be a plan?
It is yes, ma'am. It'll be very much aligned to the last time the board presented, following that specific timeline, looking at the attendance boundaries, the facility changes that would need to take place, as well as a update to the board in terms of the year by phase in, year by year and grade level, as well as some of the impacts to potentially the 5-year capital plan to fund some of the needed initiatives in terms of space at other locations. And then we will take an additional step in which we're collecting this information now is, and this will be part of the bigger plan, we have to we're looking specifically at K-8 in the north side of town. We've collected that data, but we need to look K-8 on the south side of town as well. So there's impacts that we have to have. We have to collect that data, get feedback from the board, and that will help fuel the 26-30 school strategic plan.
Okay, so looking at that, right, planning ahead. The surveys that we put out into the community and we received feedback on, we received the information at workshop several months ago on the results. Will that also be mentioned again in the new presentation of the new plan?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
As well as meeting with the faculty at the school,
Right.
conducting professional developments, listening tours. All of that is in process or has been completed to make sure when we come back to take the next step, we have everything onboarded and ready to go.
Listening tours?
Listening, in that item was to go out and meet with the faculty at the impacted school to make sure they understand what's happening. I feel as if they're 100% on board and excited, so it is listening to any concerns or issues that they may have had, because ultimately, that will affect them.
In that plan, can you please put in there town halls with community members, parents and community members at large? Because this is going to be a school of choice. So you can have, parents students who live on the far south side wanting to know how they can get into this classical school. I think it needs to be a countywide, needs to be a countywide effort for more town hall presentation. So I think that needs to be also included in there. Can you also include, and though I know that we still have a little bit of time, we don't have much time because I believe the timeline that you're looking at is to start next year. What are the recommendations for potential curriculum? That is gonna, I'll tell you, I will not vote on anything regarding classical unless there's a clear understanding or at least a tentative understanding of what curriculum is going to be recommended. Because that is the crux of classical. It is the curriculum that is taught. So I think that needs to be in the plan, please, as well. Want to make sure I didn't forget anything else. I think transportation would need to be in that. I'm not sure if you caught that. The things that I would be wanting to hear. Okay, so we've got that, classical. We talked about needing a separate workshop for the future strategic plan, and I think I'm good on this topic, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and to the team. I don't know who was a part of the 2025 strategic plan, but it was written well. It really was written well. And you giving us this information, this update on the last year, I think is very important. We have to come out of the box. The numbers losing middle and then high school, those are pretty good with what we're going through as far as vouchers and so forth. So this public school system, I believe, is doing the job we need to do to make sure that, we are serving our students and our parents. And if we don't do that, we're going to have a low number in this public school system. But I like the service of culture, not just looking at the outcome, but how we get there. And how we get there is with our teachers and making sure, and our parents being aware, our teachers being aware. So very, very important. And the community meetings, I think will be very important in this 25-30 strategic plan, probably be the most important one we ever write as far as what we're going to do in our public school system. Because there's a lot of talk out there. Our K-8 magnet, how's that going to look in North County? What are we doing to keep our kids? These are the things we need to listen to our community, our teachers, our students, and see what is interesting to them. What Ms. Shields just brought up, that was something looking toward the future. Those are the things we have to tap on. And Mr. Erickson's doing a great job with our grants and trying to keep getting these things moving forward. So thank you for adding what we need to add, the sustained instructional improvements. That's not easy to do, to have it sustainable. It's not easy to do, so thank you very much. But looking forward to being part of that 25-30 strategic plan. Anyone else on this topic?
Just makes me feel old. So next item, Dr. McMahon will be presenting our assessment calendar.
Good afternoon. I am presenting an item on the 24-25 Uniform Statewide Assessment Calendar. This is a requirement by statute that each district post on their website, as well as get district approval of this Uniform Statewide Assessment Calendar. This is an item that is an annual approval, and so what this does is it details the state required as well as district required assessments. You're looking at a multi-page PDF. I will tell you that most of this is a template that is written by the state. It's not until you get to item 4 that the district can actually entered data, and in item 4 on that calendar, it's just the dates, the windows. And then item 5 is where we detail any of the district required assessments.
Board members, any comments or questions? How much, are we testing any less than we did 5 years ago with everything?
5 years ago, yes, drastically. Yeah, the state rule is less than 5% per
Yeah.
grade level, and we're not even at 2.5% of the time.
Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I remember when I first became a board member, I mean, the testing, the amount of testing was, I don't know, Kelly, if you remember, I mean, it was just astronomical. It was crazy. So we did drastically reduce the amount of minutes that a student is testing. But you did mention in our briefing that we're adding these benchmarks for science, I believe they were. I was thinking about that. Can you talk a little bit before I ask my question about, and just kind of refresh our memory
Sure.
of what that looks like? That's new.
It is, so I would characterize it as a replacement rather than an addition. And the idea is that both the 5th grade and 8th grade science state assessments actually cover more than those 2 grade levels. The 5th grade science state assessment covers 3rd and 4th grade standards in addition to 5th grade. Similarly, the 8th grade assessment covers both 6th and 7th grade standards on that 8th grade. So to provide some more meaningful data, and to your point, over the last 5 years, we have been very strategic in understanding the purpose and roles of assessments, and we have reduced them, trying to get more strategic and efficient with what we are doing to assess. So in this endeavor, we have added topic tests in both 3rd and 4th, and then 7th and 8th grade, or 6th and 7th grade. And these are meant to replace what would you traditionally see as a chapter test. So instead of taking, and this is where I'm going a little bit off of just making up to explain, instead of taking chapter 1's test, you would, as a teacher, administer the topic 1 science test in those classes. So it's, a student is not going to see an additional test, so it's not like they take chapter 1 test for science on a Thursday, and then on a Friday, they take these topic tests, if that makes sense. So yes, there is on this calendar the addition of those science topic tests in those grade levels, but in terms of the student experience, they will not experience additional tests.
So one of the questions, or what I think about as you explained it, what I worry about is if we're taking away a chapter test that a teacher can get immediate results on how the student learned and applied that current chapter learning, right? Whatever they learned for that chapter. Chapter 3, how did the student do? And then they take that chapter test. It's very specific to the information that was given to the student during that chapter. If we take that away and replace it with something else, how does that provide specific curriculum, information informing the teacher so that they can, adjust instruction, which is really what's supposed to happen?
So that's a great question. I will say these actually provide more immediate feedback, if that makes sense, because a chapter test that as a teacher would give, they would have to grade it themselves. In this case, this is administered through the computer, and so the results are right then. So as soon as the kids take the test, they have access to those results. The other part to it is that these tests were written by teachers, and it was written through the context of the curriculum maps, which is, again, the content specialist, and Ms. Baser probably could speak a little bit more to the actual procedures of this, but teachers are involved in creating that curriculum map. And then in collaborative planning, those teachers are working together to understand what is required of that chapter test. And so what this will do is it will provide more uniform, structured data for those teachers, because this is actually, it's a state assessment that we're trying to get kids to pass. And so that teacher, how they teach it should be aligned with the content in the standards, going to the depth of that structure. And so these assessments help our teachers understand how well the students did in context of the state assessment rather than maybe their own opinion of what they should know. Not that there's any, differences here, but it provides that uniformity to the data that comes back to us.
I mean, in my head, I understand exactly what you're saying, but what I hear in application is we're teaching to the test. We're going to teach and test to the test. That's the main focus, is the state assessment, not the gaining of knowledge and information that a student would get on a regular basis. I know you're going to say no, but what I'm hearing is that these replaced progress monitoring I don't remember what you're calling them. What these required monitoring tests replace the chapter tests so that we can better equip the students for the state assessment, which is important, but then how are we actually gonna, it's just too complicated for me.
I could probably just maybe, I understand
I mean,
that.
it's not, and it's really not a complicated subject. It's just, I don't mean to make light of that, but it's kind of like, I don't want to teach to the test. Like, we eliminated all these minutes for years to avoid teaching to the test, to gain a love for learning, and now we're going back to that for the science area, or it seems like we're going back to it for that science, this particular subject area. And so I think I'm just hoping that you all can convince me otherwise.
May I?
Yes, you may.
Through the chair.
Through the chair. We teach to the standards.
Right.
And so this is standards alignment across the system. And I think what Dr. McMahon was really trying to hit on is that for us to have a system of supports, we have to be able to see across the system how we're performing. And when you parse it out one class at a time, it's really independent and individual versus us being able to look across the system and say, we are struggling with nature of science across the system. What can we do to, so this is systematizing that work. It is not taking anything away from what the classroom teacher can and should be doing with the data. And it is certainly not, picking up a test and saying we're going to teach to this test. It is, we teach to the standards.
So are these going to be strategic to the standards that they would particularly learn in that chapter?
Exactly.
Okay. And are these tests supposed to be longer or shorter than the chapter tests?
Shorter.
Shorter.
They're much more specific to the standards.
Okay.
Any other comment? I remember when we did that when I was here in secondary, and our teachers would use that once in a while, their testing instead of their chapter test. It just helped them, I think, say, am I teaching the standards appropriately? And then it also helped with the pacing, because we all know we have the 3 tests throughout the year. It just helped them keep up with it. I remember that. Any other comments? Ms. Berenborg, anything? Ms. Berenborg?
Yes, thank you. I'm good. I already discussed it all with
Okay,
the
we're good on that
superintendent.
one.
Thank you.
All righty, thank you.
Ms.
Dr. Moore?
Becerra still has the mic with items E and F.
So through the chair, I'm very excited to present to you today our school improvement planning process. I think it's very timely that it comes on the heels of the strategic plan update, because this is essentially driven by the work in the strategic plan. Let me see if we can get it up here. I think we are beginning our 4th year of a school improvement plan process that is unique to us in SDIRC. Most districts in the state do the traditional state template where they do a beginning and an end review of their school improvement planning process. We, however, go through a process of continuous improvement throughout the year. So we essentially go through these mini cycles. And beginning year 4 of this, what I can say, I like this quote because it really resonated with the fact that our school leadership teams are in the habit of continuous improvement now, where before it was we're going to write it at the beginning and we'll assess our results at the end. So the 4 phases of our implementation process really run through, they begin in the summer where we are analyzing our data from the prior year and developing action steps based on that information that run through phase 1. That phase 1 then will evaluate it through a triangulation of data, and we'll move into phase 2, and then you can see phase 3 begins in our second semester, and we finalize phase 4 going into the state assessment window, and we wrap it up with an end-of-year reflection in June. This is a graphic that really describes the continuous improvement cycle that our school leadership teams go through. They create action plans based on problem solving that occurred. It goes through about an 8 to 10 week implementation cycle. From that, we do several points of data collection to triangulate some data. We do impact reviews, which is where the district team goes out and walks the school, and we analyze the data that we collect. We combine that with the Datacom feedback that they get. That's in the Power BI app. And then we also add to that any observational summaries that the school leadership teams do. We take all of that information. I say we, it's really the school leadership teams along with support from my team that analyzes that data and then creates new action steps for the second phase. So this is really a vision of what a phase in each of these phases, what a cycle in each of these phases looks like. This slide, we call it really the cadence of accountability, and this is a slide that informs the work. So if you see at the beginning up there, we use assessment data, we go through a data analysis protocol. All of that is updated in Goal Tracker and Power BI. We communicate this information. We provide professional learning around this information at our principal, AP, and coach meetings. We also do walkthrough data. We do problem solving with our school leadership teams. We update Goal Tracker yet again. We go into what is the impact review cycle where it's the more formalized walkthroughs. Datacom, I think everyone's heard a little bit about Datacom and knows that well at this point. Finalize that with the principal meeting as well, where we review the information. We do some professional learning around some next steps that are specific to the schools, and then we begin phase 2. So that circle really is comprehensive of the way we inform our work. The outside items is really how we communicate that work. The focus areas this year are our high yield strategies. We are starting with all schools writing action steps around differentiation. Some schools may also be adding monitoring and engagement, just depending on what their needs are and how big of a lift their differentiation lift is at the moment. We also, in the spirit of service, we have written goals specifically around operations and service this year. I know anytime we can support our students and families along with the staff around the very difficult things like the cell phone policy, the attendance policy, the discipline policy, the dress code, writing action steps and action planning around that, it's just in support of our community. This is a timeline. It depicts the phase 1 timeline. Phase 1 really begins in early August and runs through October 16th. But you'll notice that we did begin this development in July when we were at Engage with our school leadership teams for the 3-day retreat. All of it goes through, they write their initial action steps. They share that with the district. They get feedback and reviews. They also share this information with their school leadership teams and along with their school staff. And then their SAC committees, their school advisory council committees, must approve their SIP. And then we bring it to you September 23rd for your approval. And you'll notice that after that, then we have the final 2 points in phase 1 would be the impact walks and the Datacom. And the next steps are that this comes to you for your approval on September 23rd.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg, any questions?
No, thank you. Appreciate the hard work you guys have done to set all this up so that it continues to work and you tweak it to make it best for kids. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
You good? Mr. McDonald? Good?
No.
Okay. Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, when are we going to get them? When are we going to see the actual plans?
I believe they were uploaded.
Were they uploaded already?
Yes.
Okay, we'll take a look.
Ms. Becerra, just one question. I had the pleasure, I was here, and the assistant principals were working on their data. So once they get this information, does each school align who's looking at what, like say in the leadership? I know that's what we used to do. Let's say they look at their math, first PM1 math score, need to improve it. So where do they take it from there?
So they have identified not only the what, but the who and the when, and then who's following up for fidelity to that action step.
Okay.
So that could be anyone on their school leadership team. That will include at times the district support, the curriculum specialists who support them, and their teachers, of course.
Good, that's good. I remember seeing Ms. Hiller here when she was looking at them.
Yes.
So it really does flow. It really does flow, not only through the district support, but at the leadership, at the schools with your support.
This flows bidirectionally.
Thank you very much. All righty, next we have the School Advisory Council.
And that's me as well. These two items typically come together. They are both in statute and they are both required. Schools are required annually to create their school advisory councils and submit a composition report that includes the membership of their school advisory councils. I have included in your documents all of the school advisory council reports for your review. Any questions?
Any questions, board members? I sat in on the first SAC Vero Beach High School meeting. It was really good, good group. All right. Ms. Berenborg, anything on the school advisory?
Yeah. I just want to remind you guys that the School Advisory Council, when they send out their notice of meetings, they need to also attach their agenda so that people know what they're voting on, please. Thank you.
Good point. All righty. Contracted service for track and field bleachers, the press box at Jimmy Gray Sports and Community Complex. Mr. Green.
Thank you. Through the chair, this item, as we've spoken about before, as part of the Jimmy Graves Community Complex, there was a Phase 1A and a Phase 1B. Phase 1A was the track and the fields, the soccer, lacrosse, and the middle fields themselves, and the lighting and all of the site work. As we are moving forward with 1B, which includes restrooms, lockers, concession stand, bleachers, we are bringing an item forward to contract and piggyback a TIPS contract for the set of field bleachers and the press box. Those two items are at a cost of $290,743, and that does include a contingency of $13,845. Those dollars are through the fixed capital outlay that was provided to us along with community donations. We are looking to break ground hopefully in December on the entire project, but this will allow us to get these items on a bid and purchased and ready to go at the start of that work.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Rosario? Mr.
Sorry, no
McDonald?
questions.
Okay, Mr. McDonald?
No questions.
Only thing I wanted to add, and I talked to Dr. Moore about this and Nick Westenberger about the Wilson track, and I did see it on the plans that his name would be also facing 16th Street. We have it on the inside, but and he said that was part of the plan, so just wanted to double check that. All righty, that's it for the superintendent. Next item is discussion item, and we do have two added items. The first one is policy 2130, Achievement Gap Oversight Work Group. That's Mr. McDonald's item. And then we will go into the joint work group, school board employee, that's Ms. Rosario, and then the superintendent contract. So, Mr. McDonald, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I believe you all have copies of the proposed adjustment. Just for a little history, Dr. Moore and his team have been doing an exceptional job in just about every area far beyond what a lot of people might even hope or expect, but we continue to fall a little bit short in the area of the achievement gap, and which impacts our neediest students and ultimately impacts our district scores, because those are the students that are going to, whose grades have the most impact on our scores. The goal, I think it was a well-intended and great idea back when 2130 was written, and it was expected to be implemented within a short period of years. Unfortunately, it becomes more and more apparent that the conclusion of that work group is indefinite, and that's just postponing the implementation of what would have been a group to focus on and address and hopefully improve and help improve that achievement gap that we have for African American students, but also even for other students who have that same challenge. And obviously, our concern is for those achievement levels, for those neediest of students. And 2130 promised to focus on this, but the goal of this revision is to directly address and help those students. The board remains free in the future, as they choose, to respond to the unity status when and if that's ever achieved, and take whatever actions are necessary. But I think that now versus later is a better time to address this need for our neediest students. So I proposed it. I guess my question would be, are there any suggestions, recommendations, or questions that anyone has?
Thank you,
Chair,
Mr. Oh, go
just
ahead, I'm sorry.
From some context, if I can provide just a little bit of data, you know what I say, in God we trust, all others bring data, to help facilitate the conversation around subgroups. I just prepared a couple slides, and as you talk about gaps, I'd like to present this information. So this is the academic performance from 1819 to 23-24. We use this because this is the time that I have been here, as well as the variance of a pandemic. So just to set up the screens for you, you can see the top, which is the blue, is the white performance, a performance of 62 in 1819 to an improvement of 65. The orange is Hispanic. It was 45 in 1819 to an improvement of 46, so 1% improvement. But you can see the impacts of what was the pandemic, from going down from 45 to 42, up to 43, down to 41, and then shooting up to 46. And then the last is black, and this is ELA, this is reading, 33 in 1819 to 40, a 7% improvement. When we talk about the gap, we're talking about the variance between the subgroups. So the gap for black would be the variance between 62 and 33, if you're looking at 1819. Now this is math performance, and you'll see here, I'll just give you a second to digest it, won't go through it completely, but in 1819, white performance was at 64, all the way to 68 in 23-24. And then 1819, black performance was 33, improving to 44 at the end of last school year. Hispanic 51, significant drop down to 21-22, and then shooting back up to 53. This is a comparison of our neighbors as well as the state. And when you talk about the gap, you can have influence on the gap different ways. One of the ways you can have an influence on the gap is white performance going down and Hispanic or black gap staying the same. And you could celebrate, oh, we're reducing the gap. Well, no, you're not. Your white students aren't improving. What you want to see is all students improving, and where the students who are underperforming growing at a faster rate to close the gap. So you want them both to be growing, and here you look at black performance since 1819, since I've been here, in ELA, it has improved 7 percentage points, Hispanic, the 1 percentage point, and then white, 3 percentage points. So what you're seeing is the most appropriate way to close the gap. Black students closing the gap by improving while at the same outperforming white students who are significantly higher. You look at Brevard, not the same scenario. You look at St. Lucie, not the same scenario. You look at the entire state of Florida. There's one school district on neighboring counties, Treasure Coast and Space Coast, who are actually improving and addressing all students. And I will tell you, and the other slides will say the same, we address all students. We don't address subgroups. And I have said that from the moment that I got here, when principals would come in with their evaluations, and I'm going to do this for this specific subgroups, we address the deficiency, regardless of the color of the skin of the student. We are moving drastically different than the state because we do the work differently. We do it to address the needs of a child, and we do it quicker and faster than most. Here, this is mathematics, same scenario. You have counties who are forgetting to teach math. But in Indian River County, black is growing at a faster pace, but the other subgroups that are higher are still growing. Brevard, St. Lucie, Martin, the entire state of Florida, there's a pandemic in there. We've never used it as an excuse. Surrounding counties, well, maybe so. This looks at the growth. So this is looking at us in comparison to the same counties. In 1819, you know this data because I shared it. We were 33, we grew 40.5, and then that's a growth of 7.2. And this is looking from growth 1819. And this is looking at black performance. That is the 6th highest rate of growth in the state. And if you take the 5 counties that are in front of us, they don't add up to the size of our district. We're doing this better than most. Yes, still opportunities to improve because we want to grow, we want to be number 1. You look at Hispanic, even that 1.3, which we're not impressed with, but in comparison to surrounding counties, they're all in the negative. So we're 18th in the state where our surrounding counties are at 50 and 43. This is mathematics. 1819, 33.3. Growth to 43.7, which is 10.4. We're the 4th highest in the rate of growth in that time period. Look at our surrounding counties. There's not much difference between us and the surrounding counties. There's just not. Well, I guess you could say the rate of growth of our black students in reading and math is significantly different. Same thing with Hispanic. Significant growth. And if I was to go back and look, we were with exception of, in ELA, with the exception of Martin, we were the lowest in 1819, the highest in 23-24. In Hispanic, same, so we were the lowest. Now we're competing right at or higher with them. Same holds true. We were the lowest in 1819. We are the highest in 23-24. So significant growth in reading and math. That just gives you some context to what we're doing. I'm always going to want to engage in the conversation or how we improve performance for all students. I think we do that in a way that is innovative and drastically different than other states, and we have a drastically different outcome. So as the board engages in this conversation, I just wanted to provide you some information regarding the way of work that you all are leading that is producing some of the fastest growing rates in the state.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg, are you on? I don't see her on the, did we cut her off?
I am on, thank you. No comment, I'm fine.
Okay, Dr. Pasca?
So I guess I'll start with, I find the slides in the presentation very helpful. I think, objectively, if you look at the data, we clearly as a school district and a county are doing great work to improve our achievement gaps and improve education for every kid. I don't think that's really something anyone can question objectively, although I'd be happy to hear their objections and questions about that. But I think the data is really clear that, we're vastly improved compared to most of the other counties in the state. And, obviously we have had the joint work group, I believe it is, that has been meeting monthly. And that has been a big, potential part of this growth. I do have one question, is that joint work group that currently is meeting, because right now the policy we're discussing is a new work group that's separate from the old work group that's currently running, that would look at achievement gap improvement. The one that is currently ongoing, does that meet monthly, and is that a court-ordered mandate? How does that work, the current joint work group?
So yes, the committee is in place. We haven't met since, I believe, April or May. We have had some canceled meetings in between. Don't have one during the summer. We just had a meeting for September that we're having to reschedule. So
Okay.
in this policy, because this is, as it's stated, this is a policy that goes into effect after we obtain unitary status, that committee would continue, with this committee and this policy would then begin that specific work to continue to have an eye on that specific area.
Right, right. And is the current work group, the joint work group, is that mandated by court order to meet monthly?
It's not mandated to meet monthly, no, but it is mandated that we have it in place.
So it's mandated that it exists and generally meets, but they don't regulate the frequency or timing on meeting?
I'll check regarding frequency, but I don't
Okay.
think there's a specific initiative around frequency.
That's
There
fair.
is.
That's fair. You may not know off the top of your head. And what I had seen, I thought it looked like you guys hadn't met in April, hadn't met in May, not met in June, July, August, and are now rescheduling September to potentially October. And I just want to make sure from a district standpoint, we're available all these months to meet, right? We were available, is that true, or?
So we had September, which was scheduled.
Yeah.
NAACP rescheduled that specific meeting. The previous one, I was out of town and asked to reschedule. The
Okay.
meeting prior to that was actually, we collectively canceled the meeting because the work product that we were to discuss wasn't available to discuss.
Okay. So you were probably waiting on new data, and it was about to come out, and it didn't make sense to meet.
Right, yeah.
What-
Yes to that response, and it does say once a month to meet, yes.
Once a month, okay. So, obviously, I think that we should try to meet once a month. It looks like we haven't done that well the last
No.
5 or 6 months. And, I guess the question becomes, this new policy that we're potentially and considering changing to start meeting now, if the current work group has not been meeting for, maybe 5 months, and obviously, the district is doing the work daily, A. So I want to say that the data shows that you guys are doing the work, and generally have been available to meet, except for on 1 month's occasion, it sounds like. The benefit, I guess, of another work group that maybe we have a little more control over their frequency of meetings, and establishing somebody who is going to be committed to meet every month, would be something I would be interested in, because, just from, I'm not trying to point fingers at any party, but from a Department of State or diplomacy point of view, just generically, if you have two or more parties meeting to discuss an issue, or a problem or a conflict, and you're trying to resolve or create work on that, and you're not able to meet for 5 months, that alone gives me a lot of data. It gives me a lot of data on the ability of this group to actually do the work effectively, efficiently. Are they really interested in doing the work? If the Department of State was trying to work with another country like Venezuela and their new president and resolve the conflict in Venezuela, and they're not willing to meet for 6 months, that tells the Department of State everything they need to know. So just generically, and I'm not trying to point the fingers at anybody. There was some summer involved. There was, maybe we were waiting for data 1 month. There's some extraneous details here. But if I like the idea of potentially starting another work group now. I'm interested in discussing that. one that has community involvement, one that has the NAACP, and school district representation. I don't know if I can think of a negative. Having another group of people just meet and discuss what can be done to try to improve this. That being said, I'll go back to my original preface. My original statement is, it's very clear to me the district is doing the work. The data shows that we are growing way faster than almost any other district in the state, and we're outpacing the state in general. So it's obvious that we're doing the work and we're doing it well, but it's hard for me to say that having another group that's willing to meet monthly would be a negative, especially if all concerned parties are there. I'm not interested in leaving out any party, but that's kind of where I'm coming from right now.
Thank you, Dr. Pasco. I have just a few words. Policy 2130 was approved by the board in 2022 with a 5-0 vote, and a lot of work went into this policy. We are doing the work. Our African American Achievement Plan is part of our strategic plan. We're doing the work. And this policy's main purpose is that we will continue to do the work after unitary status. One of the reasons, and I was part of this, I thought it was important, is that we have districts who have received unitary status, they put everything on the shelf, nothing there, and then they were sued again because they were not doing the work. So it's just a commitment to our community, to our school district, that we won't let down. We'll continue to push forward with our students. You know, when you have an action item at the end of a meeting on changing words in a policy, you know, obviously I was blindsided. It just shows to me that you're not giving the respect you need to give to not only board members, but to our public. And for those people who stayed and talked about it, that was fine, but there would have been a lot of other people who would have stayed and made comments. When you look at this policy, it has a lot of information, but when we received this right before it was discussed, there were words crossed out that still bother me. And this is public record, anybody can get this, but when you look at the Superintendent's Achievement Gap Oversight Committee, the superintendent was crossed out. NAACP was crossed out and giving feedback. Disparities crossed out. And then we had the work group crossed out quite a bit, changed to committee. But anyway, just not having this ahead of time, it was very, very hard to get through this, so I did study it. What Dr. Pasco just said is, you know, we are doing the work, that's a given. We'll never let down on that. But again, this policy, depending on who's on the board, we want to make sure that the work continues. We had a federal court order in 1964, and then right now we are under the 2018 joint plan, the most recent order. I've gone to court a couple of times with the group. I just think, number one, it's a terrible precedent to really bring an action item that the board members are not aware of. That is policy. That took a long time to work. That's number one issue I had with that. And then not having the time to really look at it, review it, and discuss it. Had a real issue with that. But when you look overall at everything, and the last one is board commitment. The board in all schools in our system shall take active measures to maintain high expectations for students and to eliminate persistent, I'm going to read as it was, disparities and underachievement in the academic performance of individual students subgroups based on race, ethnicity, and economic class. Active measures shall be defined as those which promote equitable, inclusive, and supportive educational environments that are free from discrimination. And then the last part on this policy right here. The board shall evaluate this policy at the close of the 5-year validity period, determine the terms of the renewal cycle. But any changes in this achievement gap oversight work group, the original one, must be adopted in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act and by a supermajority vote by the board. So that would have to take 4 people to have any changes in this, and obviously I would not agree with it. I think there's a lot of history here that we really just can't sweep under the rug. I know Dr. Moore is committed in this district to closing the gap. We did well on the last test. We can do better. We can always say that. But these are the kind of things I just don't think we can throw out to our public and our school board without having a real discussion. I just think this should have been put on the workshop agenda that day. Dr. Moore is very amenable to that. Ms. Rosario added 2 things today. You know, that's fine. This is a time we can discuss. But when you look at this achievement gap policy and where we want to go, it takes a supermajority. Thank you. Ms. Rosario.
Can I just provide a little bit of, just to provide a little bit of context. The last meeting was March 7th. We had a meeting scheduled for April, and then based on that agenda, you all recall, we had a closed session for possible litigation, and at that time,
Mediation.
we
possible
requested to
mediation.
go to mediation. The attorneys had the opportunity to speak, and the agreement is that you have to have 2 continuous meetings to establish the need for mediation. The intent of that, I'm not oversharing, is my desire is to get to the point in which the work group is evaluating the work, evaluating the outcomes that were just there. That was determined, so there's been a great deal of work between the attorneys in terms of working out that mediation, and it was determined that we need to have the next meeting. That next meeting, once was scheduled, as I said, information wasn't available. The June meeting, I was unavailable, and then the last meeting, we are in the process of rescheduling right now.
Ms. Rosario?
Okay, so a few things, but before I get to those, what was voted on at our last meeting as a result of all of the talking back and forth was to ensure that this would be vetted for legal sufficiency before today's meeting, at least so that we can get that feedback. I haven't received any feedback on the recommendations that Mr. McDonald has put forward, so I'm going to ask Ms. Shattuck if she can provide, the vetting of this recommendation, and does it pass for legal sufficiency?
Yes, thank you. Through Chair, yes, I've reviewed this policy, and it does pass with legal sufficiency. And so right now, it's at the point where it's up to the board members to discuss it, to see, if they want to make any particular changes or revisions to it. And if you have any specific questions about it, I'd be happy to answer them. In terms of the case, I spoke with my colleague, Matt Carson. It would not affect your case, so that would not be an issue, but you may, just having this first chance to look over it and discuss it as a work group, may want to discuss it, make some changes to it. Thanks.
And thank you for that. I'm glad to hear that you vetted it. The other question that I had was, if this does move forward, just to be clear on the timeline for public hearing, is that 28 calendar days? Because in the past, it's always been 28 calendar days and not 30, or 28 work week days or business days. Can you clarify that for us, please?
So when you adopt policies, you adopt them in accordance with your policy. I know the policy name is legislative making, I think, but it's in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act, which does require you to give public notice at least 28 days in advance. So when you have it at a meeting where you advertise it for public hearing, that advertisement is what needs to go out at least 28 days in advance of when it's going to be heard at a board meeting. So depending on the timing of your meetings, it's usually not the next meeting, I would say, just because it needs to get put in the paper at least like I said, 28 days in
So it's
advance.
28 business days, calendar days, sorry, 28 calendar days.
It's
Because 28
calendar.
days is 28 calendar days.
Calendar.
Okay.
Correct.
And I think to respond to Dr. Moore and the slides that you provided, I think you made the case perfectly for what Mr. McDonald is asking to do. The work is being done. That's one of the things that I even mentioned, I think, I don't know, what was it, a year or two ago, when I brought this forward and said, why are we holding off? You know, and I was told, well, that's what we're doing now, and I knew that we were doing it. But the language in the current policy confirms the complete opposite, which is, well, not the opposite, but it confirms that this policy was created with the intent not to be implemented until after we reach unitary status. But because we are currently in litigation, it is so fluid, no one could determine when that could be. I mean, at this point, if you go all the way back to the original desegregation order, how many years has that been now? I mean, this could take another 5 years, this could take another 10 years. And we have a policy, and it's one of the issues, and yes, at the onset of this, I did vote for it in 2022, but you know, like most things, you kind of think things over and you realize that the purpose of a policy is not to make a statement for something in the possible future. The purpose of the policy is to drive the daily work of the superintendent and the daily work of the school board. I mean, yes, the school board and the school district. But I have yet, and I have asked many attorneys, what is the practice of and any CEO could answer the same question. You create policy to drive the daily work, current daily work. You don't create policy. It's a bad precedence to create policy, including the current litigants that are suing you. Because it's so fluid, you don't know which way the wind is going to blow. You know, look at what we have now. We started out with the joint plan that established an equity committee, and then in 2022, that was in 2018, and in 2022, it was approved by the courts to no longer have an equity committee, but to then have a work group, a joint work group. So my point is that it changes, it's fluid. And to create policy without knowing what the end result may or may not be, it's just not good to do. Now, to address, and I'm glad that Ms. Shattuck actually confirmed that this is not going to make or break, it's not going to hurt our case. It's not going to make or break anything, because what the judge is going to look for are the sections, I'm thinking of the name, the sections that are required of us within the joint plan. That's the data that they're going to look at. What we could do is create a resolution stating that we resolve to continually work past unitary status. Whenever we get there, we can resolve that at that point we are going to continue the work moving forward in XYZ, way, however way you all want to write it. That might help, but I just don't think that it is smart for us to have a policy that includes the current litigants. Now, I do like Dr. Posca's idea of having a current achievement gap work group, and I think that's what I heard you say, and the members or the membership of that current achievement gap work group could be members of the NAACP, could be members of our community, could be parents, could be business work, could be pretty much anybody that we deem to be on this, or that even Dr. Moore would recommend. And in that case, we're getting that feedback to ensure, what was that?
What's that?
I thought I heard you say something.
Oh, no, no, no.
Oh. And in that way, we could actually, we could see that the work is currently being done. The recommendations that I see here are establishing what I understand. It is, as I mentioned when it was first brought to us, it's establishing a committee, not a work group, just kind of identifying some of the differences. If there is a committee, it needs to work in the sunshine. Right now, our current work group serves in the sunshine, but again, that's because it's court ordered, right? It's not a work group. I mean, it's not a committee, it's a work group. And so the assumption for that is because there is litigation involved in that and our attorneys are involved, that work group has to serve in the sunshine. Whereas any other work group doesn't necessarily have to work in the sunshine because they are providing information to the superintendent, but committees do. Committees that are assigned by the school board have to serve in the sunshine. So there's a difference there. So I think that, that needs to keep that in mind as we move forward. And Dr. Moore, if I say anything that is not correct, correct me, please. One of the things that I see with regard to disparities, I don't understand why everybody likes that word. We want to get away from using disparities. I mean, the real definition of disparities is a difference in the level of treatment between unfair economic groups, which we do have, but achievement gaps, you mentioned it at the very onset of your presentation, Dr. Moore, when you said you do not look at achievement gaps in subgroups. You look at achievement gaps for all students. You very clearly said it. You made the case in your presentation. So you don't look at disparities based on economics or any other unfair groupings. You look at all students and where they are academically, right? That's what you stated, that's what you
We
mentioned.
provide the intervention based on the deficiency. So we address academic improvement for all students, regardless of socioeconomic status. We're addressing the deficiency when it comes to academics. And then we problem solve around whether you need free and reduced lunch. You're addressing the data that's in front of you based on the need or deficiency.
Yeah, thank you. You're making the case. The school district, I'm looking at the recommendations. The one thing that I would recommend, as I mentioned before, is that the school district, or in this policy, in the recommendation and in the current policy, they both say that the policy shall remain in effect for 5 years from implementation or from whenever we reach unitary status. I have always been in the mindset that this work is currently happening, as we know by your presentation, and there should not be an expiration date. There shouldn't be an end date. It should be perpetual. It should be the daily work that happens naturally. We shouldn't have, I recommend the changes, I recommend removing that altogether. There shouldn't be an end date. It should be something that is ongoing, which is currently happening. So to create a policy that actually mirrors what you are currently doing, Dr. Moore, makes sense. To create a policy that actually says that you are indeed addressing academic gaps, that you are currently closing those gaps, that you are doing this same work, it just makes sense. And you don't have to wait until we reach unitary status again, which could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Who knows? Hopefully not, but who knows? My last thing, sorry, sir, you want to talk to?
No, wholeheartedly believe we are doing the work right now. The policy is, and I don't need this policy to continue to do that work. The structures that we have put in place, the engagement of conversation with board members, both individually and collectively, is the work or the interaction that our community needs to continue to move the needle forward. This is an additional body of work. It is creating a committee that I don't think that we need, because this is the priority of the board. That I just think we do this work, and if I don't do this work, then fire me. Find someone else to do the work. This committee isn't going to change, it's just one additional thing that we have to do, where I think we're already doing. I think we're all doing it at the absolute highest level. The variance between the current work group and the continuation of this work group,
They're two different work groups.
they're two different work groups, but at the end of the day, I believe we have a unitary school system. The agreement that the board, the system, agreed to in 2018 is this structure, which still stays in place, which is to have this committee to prove it. Just don't put some numbers or some data on the screen, which is very, very encouraging, and it shows a great deal of growth over the last 5 years, and I'm extremely proud of it, and I'm sure everyone in the room is extremely proud of it. But it's that and then some. And the data is one indicator. But when you look at the green factors, and the green factors are the factors that need to be evaluated to determine unitary status, it's more than just academic outcomes. It is looking at transportation. It is looking at extracurricular activities. It is the subgroups of each of those different areas of the joint plan. That group, the joint work group, is to evaluate the district's progress towards unitary status. I feel, David Moore, that we are there, but we have to, A, create the relationships and the structures and the protocols, which have taken a great deal of time, to get to that specific point. The creation of this policy, and it is not typical to have a policy that says this will go into effect after you do something. But it was an insurance that we to provide to the court to say that the district, the school board, is committed to continuing that specific work. So I see them as, and we've communicated that to the court. So I see the proposal of this committee, which is to evaluate the efforts of the system for continued elimination or reduction of the gap. I see that as the school board responsibility and my responsibility. So I don't know that we need an additional committee to do the work that we are collectively already doing. And then this committee is looking specifically, the current committee, at the work group around the green factors, so we can go to court at a certain point, sooner the better, in which the entire committee says, we collectively, as a community, think we have gained unitary status. That's the desire of the court. And the court and Doc Jones has been there. I have been there. It has been made abundantly clear to me that that is the expectation of the judge, who is Williams, who's overseeing the case, is that the parties come together to say that you have unitary status. And she's going to hold true to this work group being successful to reach the outcome that was agreed in 2018. So a little all over the place, but hopefully that's
I think you said it perfectly. You don't need the policy to determine the current work, this particular policy, to determine the current work that you're already doing.
Correct.
Again, you seem to just keep adding to support Mr. McDonald's recommendations. In that sense, I would say then do away with the entire policy. because you're doing the work all together. You're currently doing it. Now, you also said that and this is where I think it's very confusing and it presents as controversial. So I'll be the one to say it. The joint work group is separate and apart because that joint work group, based on litigation, right, based on court order, is supposed to happen to accomplish certain things, right? We have those sections that we have to address. The joint work group that had been meeting, has not met in many months, but had been meeting before. They are required to meet on a monthly basis to address the items in the joint plan, in the partial unitary joint plan, right, from 2018. That work is still going on. This work group is different. This work group is saying, at a future date, God knows when, you, the superintendent, will create an achievement plan, achievement gap work group to close the gap for all students. That's the gist of this, which is exactly what you are currently doing. So you don't need it for a future date because you're currently working on it. What becomes controversial was that in this policy, current policy, it includes the words, or it includes in the purpose the current litigation case. It also includes in there at the end that this policy won't begin until after unitary status. So those two things in this one policy make it very complicated and give the impression that it's going to be controversial because if we don't approve it, we're not in favor or we're not in support of reaching unitary status or addressing the issues within the Black student population and the gap, closing that gap. You know, it's just going to seem like we're not in favor of any of that work, which it couldn't be further from the truth. Because if we want to address the achievement gap for all students, that would include, of course, and I would think as a priority for this board, which I know that this board has already said many times, it is a priority to reach unitary status and to reach every single area that is required of us in the 2018 joint plan, which, like you, on face value, I would say we've probably already gotten there, at least on many of those areas. So this plan that Mr. McDonald, and after talking with you, Dr. Moore, this plan or this policy that Mr. McDonald is recommending just seems to make sense to either make it a committee that happens now or do away with it altogether, and then we can come up with a resolution. Or we can even come up with a policy that actually just very simply says, we are committed to reaching unitary status and going above and beyond all that is required of us, even past unitary status. I mean, that simply in a policy will be exactly the same thing, really. So I see those two opportunities. My last point is on the issue of supermajority. So in doing that, we have other policies that actually have supermajority in there. And in thinking about that, I'm going to pose this to our attorney. There is no definition of supermajority. Supermajority doesn't even, there's nothing in Robert's rules that addresses supermajority. Haven't found anything in legislation that addresses supermajority, only 2/3. You can see 2/3 in there. There's nothing in our policies that actually define supermajority. You would think that supermajority would be 50% plus one, or the majority, simple majority plus one, but it's not been defined. So can you please address the supermajority? Right now, there are 4 board members. And it's supposed to be based on the quorum. If we were at a special meeting and only 3 board members showed up, the simple majority would be 2. What would be the supermajority?
Through the chair. So you do have it in not many policies, but you have it in a few policies, as you noted. So I was looking at the policies that you do have it in, and it appears that, I thought I had them pulled up. In the couple of policies that you have it, it does say, like your mascot policy, 9700.02. It does say that it requires a supermajority, and the term supermajority means 1 vote more than a simple majority of the quorum present. And then you also have in policy, I know it was in one more policy that you had supermajority, and you defined it the same way. And so I would say that that would be how you would be defining it here. Yeah, I think it's in your policy. No, that does not look correct. I lost the other policy that you had it, but you had it defined the same way. And if you look at just Wikipedia, like what's a supermajority? It's, something over a majority, right? So I think that that is correct. You have to look at what the quorum present is, and then you have to look at what a majority is, and then it just has to be more than that. So like 1 member more than that would be your supermajority.
So, but none of that is, it's not, other than that one policy, which I did remember that. I actually wrote the mascot policy, so I do remember that. But because it's not written anywhere, okay, let's just say a special meeting were called tomorrow. 3 board members show up. Of the 3, a simple majority would be 2. But the policy that's before us is a policy that says you need a supermajority vote. In that particular case, there wouldn't need to be a supermajority, or could there? I mean, there wouldn't be, because it would be 2. It's just 2. There, you can't get the simple +1, because then that would be a unanimous vote, but then that doesn't define super majority.
So I would say that it does, because it does talk about supermajority meaning 1 vote more than a simple majority of a quorum present. So it depends on what your quorum is. So if your quorum is 5.
3, let's go with the 3, because
that's. 3 is a
that's,
majority and 4 is a supermajority.
right. That's,
If your quorum is only 3, then your majority is 2, then your supermajority is 3, which is also unanimous, but in that instance, that's what the supermajority is. So it is dependent on what your quorum is.
yeah,
Now, one thing to remember with regard to your quorum too, is that as long as you have a quorum physically present, you may have somebody also, like Ms. Berenborg is today, joining via your video teleconferencing, and they can vote as well.
but that, we know that's the case anyway.
Right, I'm
So
just
that-
pointing
I don't
that
think-
out, is that it's not just physically present, it's
Yes, we know.
all of your board members.
Well, you need a
count.
physical quorum.
You do. To have a
So
meeting.
that doesn't have anything to do with whomever is on video. You need a physical quorum. Yeah, I think that we need to discuss that further, because it's not clear, and it sounds to me like we need to address or talk about defining that for this board. Since it's not clearly defined in Robert's rules, it's not clearly defined in state law. It seems obvious, I agree with you, that if you have, 5 board members, a super would be at least 1 over the simple. But I think we need to have that in writing, because it could be, what if some boards have 10 board members or 7 board members, and they've defined their supermajority to be 6. whereas their simple might be, what would be their simple, 4? Their
So-
simple would be 4 of the 7. But they might have in their policy 6 of the 7. Whereas, you and I might say, well, all you need is 5. Anyway, my point is, I think we need to define that.
So Madam Chair, just,
Okay, I got a lot to say, but go ahead.
okay. My recommendation is that we don't move forward with this policy. My recommendation is you continue with the current policy that you have in place, with the understanding that it is not a typical policy, but the intent of the policy was to ensure that we never walked away from that work. That's my recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, I haven't, it's my turn. When you look at the executive summary of the Achievement Gap Oversight Work Group, in an effort to be proactive, it is incumbent upon the School District of Indian River County Board to turn its focus toward closing the achievement gap. The current provision in place eventually addresses, in the distant future, the achievement gap issue. When I worked with Dr. Shafty, Dr. Ward, Dr. Jacobs on all of this, it was simply the intent, when he's not there, other board members aren't there, will we continue the work? You're right, you won't see many like this. You won't see many policies like that. We are making a commitment to continue the work. The work group that is established by the court order is a work group established by the court order. While I was on the team, we canceled 2 meetings. And then I know the NAACP, I looked at it because it was on our meetings. All of a sudden it's canceled. They canceled. Don't know the reason, lawyers, whatever. But of the last 3 canceled, we canceled 2 of them. 1 the day before. When you look, you just can't say, I'm going to throw out this policy. That's almost like when we had the action item, oh, we're going to look at words in a policy. We cannot do that to our board, and we cannot do that to our public. People who stayed and maybe knew about it, they had some things to say. I know people who left early that time would have stayed had they known. I go back to what Dr. Posca said. We're doing the work. We've got to continue the work with the work group. That is the most important thing to do. I agree. This to me, I think is just getting torn into things that we're missing the point. Let's be the district in this state that says, we're never going to let this go. We're never going to put it on a shelf. We're never going to get sued again. This is a district that went to number 9 in the state with all of our testing and so forth. You saw the growth we've had at Hispanic and Black students. But every one of us in here would say, it's not enough. We've got to do better. And that's why we're in education. When we look at, obviously we can't vote at a workshop or anything, but I just think this is muddying the water. This is here so that we will continue to do the work. I have hope on the work group. We had the partial unitary status. I'm sure every board members know the 10 components of the 2018 joint plan. We had the partial unitary status with the last board, good job, on the facilities, administrative, and support staff. Now we've got those other components. A lot of them deal with mentoring, hiring African American students, the achievement gap, extracurricular, transportation. We were close, I think, on a few of them. And I know the NAACP and the school district have the same focus. We want to do right by all of our kids. In this particular instance, our African American students. One thing that bothered me the most on these cross-outs, again, I couldn't look at this till after the meeting, that we actually crossed out the NAACP in this new committee. That doesn't even make sense. We do not need to change anything here. Once we get the unitary status, once we really say to the work group, maybe as a board we say, come on, you've got to meet every month. Let's do it. Let's go. We want this work done. We want to continue to monitor it. That's the key. That is the key. I know Mr. Brown is not going to ignore him in the audience. That is the key. Everyone on that committee, work group committee, has work to do, and they know it. I think I told you this before. When this started, I wasn't with the school district. I asked Mr. Brown if I could be on the equity committee at that time for the NAACP. I was not chosen. That's okay. I was at the meetings before I ran for school board because I knew how important it was. We do not need to mess with this. We need to focus on what is happening now. We need to follow the federal court order, and we need to support the district doing the work and the NAACP doing the work. And I'm not a lawyer, but to change anything, any revisions to this achievement gap oversight work group policy must be adopted in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act and a supermajority vote by the board. Come on, everybody in here knew a supermajority was 4 out of 5. I know we can write it down, but we knew a majority was 3 votes, supermajority 4. Let's not play games. That's all I have.
So I have a follow-up. Oh, Dr.
Yeah.
McMahon.
Yes, Dr. who's
Dr.
next?
McDonald.
I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald. I'm sorry.
Yeah, first of all, I keep mentioning the time frame. It should be noted that this came up, 2 weeks ago, so we've had 2 weeks before now to think about it, address it.
That's correct. We just couldn't discuss it until now.
I've got the floor, thank you. So the next step would be to move it to a business meeting, which will be 2 weeks from now, to offer it for public discussion for 28 days. Then the follow-on business meeting in October would be the final resolution. So I don't think the time frame is too tight or too unreasonable for us to be able to address this. I don't think that the time frame is a factor. I do want to acknowledge again the great work that Dr. Moore and the team has done, and really impressed to see in terms of growth, the growth has been most substantial for our black students, which was terrific. Not so impressive for our Hispanic students whose growth has been 1%. If we are concerned about that gap, if we are concerned about there being a gap and if that's worth focusing on, the gap should focus on not only the black, but the Hispanic students and perhaps others as time goes on that need that focus. We should recognize that, well, in terms of the question of whether it makes sense to exclude the NAACP, it wouldn't make sense to create a committee at this point in time which basically would replicate a work group which is already in place at this time. However, that work group's focus is on working to achieve unitary status, and it includes a number of other factors, as Dr. Moore stated. This committee would be a committee of the board. The committee of the board's role would be to inform and report to the board to help the board make policies and make decisions and take actions. So that's different than a work group, which is a result of a legal action that were in place. There are factors at play outside the factors that the school district can directly affect, particularly family, perhaps economic factors, community factors. Those are all factors that parents or other community members can bring to play in a discussion, and they can hopefully identify some challenges, some issues, and some solutions that they can bring to the board. The board can suggest as methods to implement and further achieve the reduction of that gap. So this committee plays a very different role than the work group which is currently going on in parallel. I guess in response to the question of do we want to be the district to say, I think we want to be the district to say that we're focused on the kids. And if we're focused on the kids, I can't see anything that makes more sense than to take this nebulous sometime in the future policy and bring it forward and implement it in such a way that can have a real impact and that it can really do something to inform the board, to help Dr. Moore and the staff ideally find some additional new ways to reduce that gap and to serve our children. So I propose this because I promised that I would be focused on the kids, and I think this is one way that we can do that.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg, do you have anything at this point? I know she's there. Ms.
No,
Beren-
I've just been listening to everything. Thank you.
Okay, just to reiterate, Superintendent said no, this committee was really not needed at this time. I am in no way ready to just throw this to the public. We haven't even discussed every one of these crossouts, so I'm not ready to do that. And again, we have talked about what the work group is doing, that is established, and what they are doing. If you look at the 10 components of the 2018 joint plan, that says it all to me. This is what we must do. Why would we do it adding an extra group like this? This other one was talking about once we do get unitary status, and I see that as flowing and doing something that will be good for this community. It doesn't say add another committee right now. We're just, I think, messing up the work, because the work group, when they meet regularly, are doing the work. They have the data. If you've ever been to one of those meetings or online with those meetings, that data is out there. That data is given to the NAACP beforehand. The work group has it, so you're ready to discuss all of those components. I see this as extra work, not only on the superintendent, but on the district staff, and the board needs to put their support, their energy behind the work group that is working under the 2018 joint plan. I'm no way ready to even start talking about these things, and there's no vote at a workshop, so lot of crossouts that I don't agree with. Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I think you just said it perfectly, Dr. Jones. You just said you're not ready to implement a new work group now, but but the work is being done. I mean, it just seems very, it's like you're speaking in circles.
No, ma'am.
But you're saying the same thing, and I understand what you're saying, but then you keep coming along to, this isn't work that needs to be done now, and yet this is work that needs to be done now. I get the sentiment, and I understand, and I think that we should have a policy then, that actually says what the first sentence reads in this policy and the last paragraph. We can very simply say, we are committed to ensuring that we will never again, however way we will never again be in litigation for desegregation or under the desegregation order or a future desegregation order. But let me ask you this. And then that actually addresses exactly what you want without convoluting it, without making it complicated with all this other stuff in here that doesn't address Black and brown students only. It addresses all students. And I think that's the difference, is that all this other stuff is an academic achievement gap group for all students, not just Black and brown students. And if we're going to work towards a future work in our district that is past unitary status, addressing the issues that are in the 2018 joint plan and beyond, it should be specific to Black and brown students, to make sure that we never end up in some other lawsuit later on down the line. But you also said that you didn't have time to look, there's a lot of things, but you did because you knew that it would be on this.
Well, I disagree with a lot of the crossouts.
But this is the time.
Yeah.
This is the time in which we're supposed to talk about every single one of these crossouts in our work group, in our workshop.
Okay.
This is the time where it was on the agenda, and to constantly bring up the fact that Mr. McDonald added it at the last meeting doesn't help us. Right now, we're talking about it now, and having your questions answered about each one of these now would be a great opportunity for you to do it. That's what this is all about. That's what that's what we do.
Okay, I can start with that.
So, I'm all in favor with a new policy that actually just very specifically, very clearly, and very plainly says that we are committed past unitary status to never be in litigation again.
Okay, Understood.
how you will,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah, I understand that. Dr. Pasca wanted to say something.
Yeah, if we do move this forward, I would like to recommend changing under Superintendent's Achievement Gap Oversight Committee. This is on, like, page 3. I would like to change the membership to include the NAACP district, as well as community representation. That community could be appointed by the board, or there could be another, way to get those members. But if you can retool the membership to include those 3 groups of parties, that's something I would recommend. And then, I think in general, the biggest issue with school districts and these lawsuits that have been resolved is that statistically they go back to doing what they were doing before. In this policy, we commit to doing it for 5 years, as currently written. I would like to change it as that there's no sunset to the work. And I think if you do that, what we actually do is we create a better policy potentially than what we have. You'd have to go through all the strikeouts and all these things. But if it's in perpetuity, it includes the NAACP, it includes community members, and it includes the district. I think we have an excellent committee that can keep doing this work after unitary status is achieved. And we may find that a different committee with slightly different composition than our current joint work group, they may have some interesting ideas on how to make some improvements. It may not change anything, it may help, but I don't think it can hurt anything. So I think there is a potential pathway to move forward here. I understand your resistance to trying to change it for many reasons. But if it did include the NAACP as membership and the committee continuing the work of ending achievement gaps in all students in perpetuity, I mean, I think that's something that maybe we could get your support on possibly. It might take work to do it, but.
Now, you said after unitary status, correct? You just did say that.
In what part? What do we?
Question for the attorney before I start going through all of this. It must be, any revisions must be by a supermajority vote. So if we don't have a supermajority vote, or we don't think we have a supermajority vote, is this something we don't need to talk about? I'm just asking. We've been talking about it already.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say I was able to find that other policy. It is commemoration of school facilities is the other policy in which you require a supermajority, and it defines it the same way, which is supermajority vote shall mean 1 vote more than a simple majority of a quorum present. And so if you all do not, because I am hearing a rather diverse opinions, some people saying maybe we should get rid of the policy altogether, maybe we should change it to 2 sentences, maybe we should change it to say this, maybe, you know what, if you can't get a supermajority to kind of have the same idea about this policy, it will die when you vote on it, so it may not be worth bringing to a vote if you can't kind of feel in this work group that you're getting some sort of consensus with how you feel about, moving forward with this policy. And just something else to put out there is that the whole purpose of putting supermajority in a policy is a board's trying to bind itself to the policy and make it harder to change. So that is the purpose of putting that in there to begin with.
And that's what we did in 2022 with the 5-0 vote. It was a real commitment to say, when we get unitary status, we're going to keep moving on. We're going to keep moving on. Whether we're here, whether the superintendent's here, we're just going to not let that go.
For 5 years, though.
Yeah, we said,
But
that
let's
should
do
have
it.
been
How about we
perpetuity.
just keep doing it?
I'll say, I would go with perpetuity, but again, if we're going to take the time to go through this, and I'll do it right now. I mean, but do we have a supermajority? Because that is in policy.
But
that we discussed. Yes, ma'am.
yeah, I don't think it's appropriate for you to ask if we have a supermajority now, because we're not taking a vote now.
That's true,
And
but
right
I
now,
just
we're
want to
just
get a
discussing,
feeling.
and we don't want to have any potential violations of anything. We certainly don't want to hear how board members will vote, but it does seem like he has some support for some consensus. Mr. McDonald, I keep saying doctor.
Okay, all right. Let's begin.
Dr.
then.
Jones, I have a question for you. You mentioned before something about, something to the effect of, if this is not voted on, or if we don't keep the current policy, the inference was that the board doesn't care about the work.
That was not my inference.
Well, this is how I understood what you said. And again, I'm not quoting you exactly, but you made some sort of inference to that when you said, this is what the board should think is very important, and if we do away with it, it would. So my question to you is, if this entire policy did not exist right now, are you saying that, would you interpret that to mean that this board doesn't think that the work towards unitary status and beyond is not important?
I can't answer that for every board member. I don't know.
General, I'm saying
I'm
in
just saying in
general.
general, when we did this, and again, you were part of the board with that, and this took a lot of time that we committed ourselves, even though we may not be here, to make sure the work would continue. To me, it was pretty simple. We will continue the work. And within the policy, we had the board commitment, the superintendent commitment, the summary, the purpose. So I thought it was pretty clear that we would continue the work. And as someone who's been in this district a long time, that meant a lot to me. So I just thought it was saying, hey, this is really cool. This board's going to continue the work. That was the main purpose on that. And being on the work group, I felt that was important for the judge to know. We did share that with the judge. I thought it was important for the NAACP to know, and I thought it was important for our community to know. I know we're getting into a lot of details, but that was a simple message for me.
So-
It's a simple message. And so do I think it would not continue? Not with Dr. Moore here. We'll be working on it every day. But, when I'm gone, when you're gone, and we're not on the board, we want to make sure it does continue. And that was the main purpose. So I just think at this time, my opinion, that we have the work group. We continue to focus on the work group. We support Dr. Moore, the NAACP, in making sure they have everything they need to get it done, and that this stays the same as far as we will continue when we get unitary status, because the work is being done. This is just, if you will, a safety net for our kids, a safety net.
But everything that we do is a safety net for our kids, now, currently, not in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Everything that we do now is a safety net for our kids. And so I think that's when you throw things like that out there, it kind of gives the impression as if we're currently not doing it.
Ms. Rosario, I'm just going to ask you, just please don't interpret what I'm saying. Let me
Well, I'm
say
a
what
human
I'm
being who
saying.
listens to you, and based on the words that you say, I'm going to hear what I'm going to hear.
Obviously,
And
yes,
so when I
yeah.
bring it up and I ask you to clarify, it's because that's how I interpreted it, not how it is being interpreted by the entire world.
And
but
I should
how
be more
this board
specific,
member
right.
was hearing it.
In
And
this,
so-
in
but-
this with
but so
unitary
my-
status,
Yeah,
yeah.
so my question to you is, why not consider a policy that very specifically says we are fully committed to the 2018 joint plan and beyond,
Dr. Moore,
where
do you
it
have
doesn't
anything?
have all this other stuff in it?
I guess one thing I would say is, none of those questions came up when we talked about
But we're
it.
talking about it now.
I know, but to me, that's a little bit concerning, because when we wrote this.
Okay, but Dr. Moore,
Okay,
I mean,
I
Dr.
just wanted to ask
Jones.
Dr. Moore the question. I mean, as far as what Ms. Rosario just said, I just think this is something we should let stand for now, and then move forward with our work group, and then see where we need to go even then.
So, through the chair, multiple conversations taking place all at the same time. Creating an additional policy to address the intent here is a different, it's a different policy, but you're also changing the structure and how you've committed to change it. So we're here, you're going to continue what was the work group with the NAACP versus saying we are continue to be invested in the 2018 joint plan. Both saying the same thing, but the structure on how you've committed to it is significantly different. So the board has to determine, do we want to make changes to this policy? Your supermajority is that you can't change it unless there are 4 people to change it. Doesn't mean you can't workshop it,
Right.
which is what you're doing, and
Right.
make recommendation changes. Doesn't mean you can't send it out to public hearing. You don't need 4 votes or to send it out to public hearing, but when you come back for the final, you would have to have the supermajority votes. My recommendation, again, is keep the policy. Don't make changes to it because the intent of it is specifically to address everything you spoke about and when the policy was created. My biggest concern with it is it is changing, it is adding responsibilities to me that I think we have demonstrated collectively that we already address. And if you do choose to rework the policy, it says Superintendent's Achievement Gap Oversight Committee, but I've been removed from the committee itself. So there's some workshopping that has to take place.
Okay, I would just ask the board if we could consider waiting until the work group meets for the next few months. I'm assuming that we'll have at least 3 before December, before we take a look at making any changes in this. Would anyone have a consensus with that?
What would that do?
I'm just asking until the work group, the actual work group meets, the one that is federal court order, see how they're going, because they haven't met in a few months, see if we need to maybe even take a look at this again. I'm just asking to hold on this until we get some more meetings with our work group, which is a joint plan on what the federal court order is at this time. That was my question.
So here's the part that becomes the convoluted. You're mixing apples and oranges. One thing has nothing to do with the other. What the current work group is doing and whether they meet tomorrow or in 2 months has no bearing on the creation of a policy that is to be enforced whenever. They're 2 totally different things. And whether that work group is working well or they're failing in their function or their purpose, again, has nothing to do with the creation of a new policy, or the creation of a policy. So I just think those are 2 totally different things.
Thank you. All right, let me rephrase that. Would the school board consider accepting the superintendent's recommendation not to create this work group, this policy at this time?
Well,
He has said that twice now, and just thinking it'd be more work on him. And I know it's 2 separate things. We do have a work group established to take a look at our data and our joint plan. So I'm just asking if we consider that. I'm going to ask Dr. Posca if you have anything to say on that.
So I just want to take a moment to, I guess, give my opinion and recommendation regarding the current joint work group. Since you guys haven't met since March, it's my strong recommendation that you guys meet in September and not reschedule that meeting. This is a court-ordered work group that needs to meet monthly. Regardless of why you haven't met in soon-to-be 6 months, you guys need to meet in September. I'd like to hear other board members' opinion to direct the district to set up a meeting in September because, as far as I'm concerned, it's a violation of the plan that we've committed to.
Thank you. Would you agree to set this aside for now, another?
If we can change the memberships to allow the NAACP, district staff, and then some community members,
Superintendent.
and we also change it to, instead of sunsetting after 5 years to perpetuity, I'm interested in continuing conversation on this policy. Because I think, right now we have a joint work group that's sole thing is to look at ending essentially a lawsuit. But I think it would help to have a committee from the board that is focused essentially on achievement gaps, and to include the NAACP in that some district staff and some community members. I don't see that as harming anything.
Okay. Mr. McDonald, you want to continue, Ms. Rosario? Because then we could start with all the cross-outs.
I can accept Dr. Posca's recommendations there. I would just add Dr. Moore to make sure that Dr. Moore is on the work group, the NAACP or representatives of the NAACP. I would also add any other family or parent, community members on that work group. I know Dr. Moore said that it would be more work for him, but it's work that you're already currently doing anyway. And then you also said that it's more work for, if it were more work for you now, or not yet, it will be more work for you whenever we reach unitary status and beyond. So you either address it now or not. Then the other thing, so I would accept Dr. Posca's recommendations if you can make those changes. Also, I definitely, as I mentioned earlier, do not believe in the 5 years. I think it should be daily work moving forward. I have a question, or not a question, maybe a question or a statement on supermajority. So I understand what the assumption is on supermajority. I get it. Some policies are very clear on what the supermajority is, but others are not. So the other ones are not clearly written where it says a supermajority in this case would be 1 over, or 2 over, or 3 over the simple majority, whatever it would be. And if a policy is not clear on that, but others are, that would mean that that policy would need to be written to be very specific.
So I wasn't there when this policy was put into effect. I'm only aware of 3 policies in all of your policies that mention simple majority, and the other 2 define it that same way. So I would say that this one should be read to be defined the same way. I would also say that generally speaking, if you have a word used in a policy that's not defined, you use the normal dictionary definition. And so if you look at the dictionary definition of what a supermajority is, it's a proportion of votes in excess of a simple majority. So, I mean, I don't
what's that
think that there's
proportion?
any,
It could be anything.
but that's what I'm saying, we're using 1. So I'm saying that's as small of a supermajority as you could possibly have, is saying anything over a majority, which is what we're saying. We're saying 1 over a majority. So I don't think there's any other way you could read it.
Sure you could. It could be a proportion. It could be 10% over, or 3% over, or 4% over, or 0.5% over, whatever that is. I mean, it could be. There's a case for that. Also depending on quorum and depending on how many members there are. So I think that just needs to be defined. I really do. What were the other 2 policies? I know you said the mascot one. What were the other 2?
It's the commemoration of school facilities, which is 7250.
Okay,
And
I
the
think-
school mascot one is 9700.02. But even if you're looking at
And what was the
percentage,
third one?
the third one's the one we're discussing.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
those 2 were ones that I drafted and brought forward. It's probably, I made sure that there wouldn't be any discussions on what supermajority is for those particular policies.
But what I'm
Okay.
trying to say is that it's something more than a majority. So the smallest thing we can have more than a majority on our board is 1 more than a majority. So I don't think there's any other way you can read it other than requiring even more.
That's what I said,
All
you
right.
could.
Can I
mean,
respond?
All right,
a little
Dr.
bit?
Posca has a comment.
Just simply on a 5-person board, a majority would be 3, and then a supermajority could technically be anything over 3, 4, or 5, depending on stated things. So at a minimum, it's always going to be 4 here.
Yes, thank you.
So,
All right,
to
all
the
right.
board, a question.
That-
right, just a
I'm
moment.
sorry, say that again?
So the majority on a 5-person board is 3. A supermajority is always going to be over that. So it's either a 4 or a 5. And technically, we could write down, and decide what that number is, but it's always going to be at a minimum of 4.
So,
Okay,
as
we're
I
going to
was
start
saying-
going through this line by line, but Mr. McDonald, you're
Yes,
next.
thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Shattuck, do we have a legal exposure, as we're currently in litigation for 60 years with one group due to issues in the past, do we have a legal exposure from another group in the future if this tremendous success that we have, particularly relative to the subgroup of black students, if the Hispanic students remain at 0 or 1% growth over a period of time, are we not exposed to a similar complaint and potential lawsuit from another group which says that we have not focused on them and that they are then the brunt of an achievement gap sometime in the future?
So, through the chair, if I understand this question correctly, so with desegregation, that was something that was passed that all school districts were under, and there were, lots of school districts under these desegregation lawsuits. There's still a few in addition to us. So I would say that's kind of separate from the desegregation lawsuit that we're under. There's always a possibility for lawsuits, whether they are well-founded or not, whether they're going to be thrown out as insufficient or not. So there's nothing you can do to really stop people from filing lawsuits in that regard. Having said that, I think that everybody in the room has agreed upon one thing, which is that the superintendent's already putting things in place to lower the achievement gaps, and that it's already being successful. So I would say that that is, the most important thing is the work that's being done.
Okay, we're going to
If that
go,
answers that.
because this is the time to do it.
I had a follow-on to that. Yeah, so it would seem that there is that potential to a larger extent. One of the objectives of adjusting this policy would be to broaden it so that other groups, such as Hispanic in this case, or other groups that need to be addressed now or in the future, that they can get that attention, that their concerns and their issues and whatever their challenges are can be addressed as well. And to Dr. Posca's point, I have no objection at all for the NAACP to be a participant in this. It was removed from the perspective that it didn't make sense to create a new committee that would do not the same work, but to do similar work in a parallel state at the same time. It sort of didn't make sense to say we're going to have this ongoing NAACP work group, and then we're going to create a committee with the same people to do similar work. That sort of didn't make sense. So the reason for not including them was that just didn't make sense. But I have no objection to the recommendation that we have some members of that committee specified in the policy, and we might want to specify as some of the subgroup members as parents, or potentially try and include one or two other at-risk subgroups such as Hispanics. But I have no problem with that. It just didn't seem originally that it made sense to do them concurrently as it was written.
Okay, let's start with the executive summary. I'm just going to address these to Mr. McDonald since he brought these changes up. First one, why did you change from work group to committee?
Okay, because a committee is under sunshine, and a work group, aside from the one that currently exists, would not be under sunshine. So it would not be, and also this would be a committee reporting to the board, so it's a committee of the board.
All right. Purpose, the school board is committed to closing the achievement gap, and you cross out the next 5 lines.
Right.
Compliance with the DSEG order, as outlined in the 2018 joint plan for unitary status, the Sharpton for School Board of Indian River County, beyond insurance compliance with the requirements of the court's August 2018 order, document 128. Just why did you cross all that
Okay,
out?
because the work group as it exists right now, that is the challenge and the charge and the responsibility of the ongoing work group which exists. So to leave that in, I'd be creating an identical group. The idea of this group is to focus on the achievement gap itself and to be not connected to the desegregation order, even though the outcome, the success of this group would and should and hopefully would very definitely impact that achievement gap and impact the same objectives that the desegregation order began.
Okay, the next sentence was establishment of a workforce representative of all students. You crossed out diverse.
I'm trying to find that spot.
It's under purpose.
Establishment, which line? Okay. As well as establishment of a workforce representative of all. Right. It's taking the specific NCAA issue, NAACP issue. I keep making that mistake. Out of the equation and broadening it so that the policy is going to address not only what the original work group, which is ongoing right now, addresses, but to address a broader range of potential aspects that might be applied here.
Okay, and then the work group versus committee, you've already answered that. Make recommendations to the board, the superintendent, and the executive team. Okay. Board commitment, you cross out disparities. Can you tell me why?
Because I think an underachievement more directly focuses on the goal and intent of this committee, which is something that's measurable and something that addresses now and ongoing issues where we have individual students or groups of students who are falling short of that objective, and we would want this committee to look at the data of those students and try and find solutions and improvements based on that underachievement.
Crossing out equitable, inclusive. Under promoting equitable, you said supportive educational environments, but crossed out equitable and inclusive.
Yes, this is not directed at diversity, equity, and inclusion objectives. This is directed at underachievement and addressing underachievement specifically.
All right, superintendent, disparities again, got that one. And the monitoring the data, overall achievement gap in each state assessed subject, and then the initiatives within the joint plan for the achievement, which obviously is court order. Why did you pull that out, which is our now federal court order?
Right, because this is not to address the federal court order. The work group exists right now and is in place if they ever meet again to try and achieve that. This is separate to achieve a similar outcome, but not tied to the court order or the desegregation order.
And they will meet again.
We hope so.
I know. You crossed out the superintendent. The school board will create an achievement gap oversight committee. Should we bring him back in here?
Well, the superintendent is going to do all the work. This is a committee of the board. So the board is creating this committee, and the superintendent's involvement, as much as he has time and availability, would be appropriate. I hesitated to include him because he's a busy person. He has the opportunity to appoint somebody, but if we and the superintendent feel that he has the time to be involved in this, then his membership in this committee would be very valuable.
Okay, and then comprised of 6 members. You crossed out 4 members appointed by the NAACP, 3 members appointed by the superintendent, 1 by the school board. Okay, so you go to 1 Indian River County resident appointed by each school board member, totaling 5, and 1 member appointed by the superintendent. Okay. All right, committee membership, we go into committee versus.
I don't want to go too far that because others have made suggestions to changing this, and this.
Well, that's where we.
This would be an appropriate place to consider various constructions. This construction is pretty similar to many of the other board committees as we construct, and it has the addition of some representation from the superintendent, if not the superintendent himself. But I'm open to other ideas as to what would make this effective.
Dr. Posca, did you add something on that earlier?
Yeah, I had stated that in order to move this forward, the memberships that I would like to see would be membership representation from the NAACP, the superintendent's office or district staff, as well as the community. So it would be comprised of essentially 3 different parties. The community staff, or the community members could be potentially appointed by board members.
Yeah.
And as far as the exact makeup and number, I mean, you can maybe retool it and propose something. I don't know the exact number on the top of my head, but.
Yeah, no matter what, when this is
Some sort of
retooled, yeah, we need to see it.
Representation
Yeah.
from everybody.
See it. Ms. Rosario, did you have anybody else on that one?
Just adding the NAACP to this as well. That was the same as Dr. Posca mentioned. I think that's important to add them to this.
Okay.
Okay, so to get an idea of number of people, so what, 2 members of the NAACP, is that appropriate, or?
I think that's reasonable. I mean, if you had 2 NAACP members, 2 district staff, and then what I would prefer to have maybe 2 or 3 appointed members of the board, then how do we go about having that number, obviously, would be the difficult part. Maybe we vote on each one. or
No, you're talking
something.
about a total number of how many?
Maybe 6 or 7.
6 or
But
7?
each school board
Something like
member
that.
having one appointment.
Well, I would actually prefer that we don't have 5 appointed members. I think it would be something closer to the 2 from the other parties, like 3. But then how do we get 5 board members to pick 3 people? You could have rotating districts. You could have a majority vote for each appointment. There's different ways to go about that. But I think something like 2, 2, and 3 would make a lot of sense and bring some balance. It's not too many people. You could still have a good discussion. You're not getting lost in the bureaucracy of the committee.
Yeah.
Well,
Ms.
I
Rosario?
would be very careful not to put us on this particular committee. It apparently, according to the way that it's written, this committee could make recommendations to the board. And I believe that there are rules, specifically in the Sunshine and in Robert's rules, where if you are an active member of a committee that makes a recommendation back to the board, it kind of puts us, it might put us, and I don't know the language, but I know that I did read that somewhere. So I would just recommend that we not be a member of this committee. I see our attorney is shaking her head.
Yeah, we don't-
Just to be sure that we are covering, dotting all of our i's and crossing our t's.
I think here we're talking about board members appointing members
Right,
of the community
right.
to be
Oh, I
part
thought
of
I
the committee.
heard us being a part of it.
No.
Oh, I apologize.
No, we're
Misunderstood.
discussing the challenge of how do you have less than 5?
Gotcha.
Because you have 5 board members, and I guess in defense of the idea of 5, does make it a little bit larger committee, but if the idea behind this is to go out to the community, particularly Hispanics and African Americans and others who are directly affected by it, to reach out to that community to try and get their ideas and their thoughts and their feedback and input, then I wouldn't be as concerned if we have 5 versus 3.
Yeah, I would want one board member to choose a representative.
Okay.
I would. All right, the committee membership, that's work group. Okay, committee, yeah, provide timely feedback and evidence-based recommendation for improvement related to district outcomes, review to the board, and the IRC and NAACP was crossed out. Let's put them back in.
Where are you now? I lost her.
The last page, I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald, the last page under Superintendent's Achievement Gap Oversight Committee. It goes committee membership, right before policy duration and revisions. Yeah, cross out the
Okay.
NAACP, I suggest we put them back in.
You by the board. Well, I guess, no problem with it, but I guess the terminology would probably be the board and the members of the committee.
What?
Is that right?
No. No, that's not what you said on the cross out. You just crossed out on the original one that we got that night.
Right.
The board and the IRC NAACP, which was crossed out, and that's probably the first thing I noticed when I looked at this. Yes, ma'am.
Here's what I initially see here is that the committee doesn't make recommendations to the NAACP.
Right.
The committee makes recommendations to the board. And so,
The NAACP is a part of the committee
Right.
recommending things to us.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like a circular thing. It doesn't make much sense like this.
So you say cross it out?
Well,
Well, the idea is
Yeah, because
they're
they're the ones
inclusive
talking to us,
of the
right?
committee as we're constructing it.
yeah,
So they would have active input as well as feedback.
right.
they are giving us recommendations.
But the committee itself is a committee of the board, so they report back to the board.
Yeah, provide timely feedback and evidence-based recommendations related, review to the board. I mean, why wouldn't you be able to give that? I mean, what's the issue with giving it to the NAACP?
I don't think there's an issue at all, just, I mean, to specify that.
They don't make recommendations to the NAACP because the
No.
NAACP doesn't set policy at our school.
Provide timely
at the school
feedback and
district level.
evidence-based
The original policy made sense in that it was part of the work group for the desegregation order. But in this particular committee, the idea is for it to function as, and give direct recommendations to the board. The NAACP would have participation in that. They would receive that information with the board and the public. Just from a terminology standpoint, I don't know that.
How
makes
about
sense.
then share with the NAACP, at least have them be part of it?
But you can add a bullet. How about adding a bullet that says an expectation from the school superintendent is to provide the recommendations back to the work group,
So who's taking all these notes?
the video.
Playback. If I can, so, and I would
Yes.
say, I have no problem.
There's a video.
Including the NAACP here, but purely from a logic standpoint, we're talking about what this committee will do. And if the NAACP is on the committee, it doesn't make sense that they're reporting, the committee that they're a part of, they're reporting to themselves. I
Well,
mean,
we could share the information, because they would then share with their,
Well, they're the ones sharing it
group.
with us.
yeah, sharing with the group too.
Right, I mean, to that extent, I sit on two committees. Part of my responsibility is to come back and report
Right.
to this board what those committees have done, and those committees don't report to us. I take the responsibility of updating the board for that. But that's how I would see they'd still be involved, but that would be by implication. I mean, do you think, to the chair, do you think that there's an explanation here that needs to be added?
Well,
It's
I
not
just,
redundant?
I mean, all of this, I know we have the work group, the 2018 joint plan, that is separate. We're looking at this, no matter what, we have to make sure they are involved as far as a community member sharing with their constituents, sharing with their families. It's just, I just want to make sure it's inclusive, not exclusive.
Yeah.
That's all.
I'm just trying to think of what terminology.
That's what we'll have to think about, because once this all comes about and we get it again, I have to look at the writing to see exactly what it's going to say, as everybody else does. Okay, then we go into the last part, shall remain in effect for 5 years. I think we did 5 years just to kind of move it forward, but we can do in perpetuity, as Dr. Posca said. Is that what you said, Dr.
Yeah.
Posca?
Yeah, and I mean, I think and I'll reiterate why, is that the biggest problem with these desegregation lawsuits is that the districts generally go right back to what they were doing.
Correct.
And the purpose of this policy was to say, we're not going to do that. We're committed to helping every kid, especially the kids that were historically mistreated. And there's no reason we can't continue to do that. It doesn't need to sunset. I don't think it's going to be an excessive amount of work that necessitates it going away. And if it's starting to pick up red flags, we're going to want to know that. We're going to wish we had the committee doing the work, whether it's 5, 6, 10, 20 years from now, long after all of us are gone.
Thank you for saying that, because that was the main purpose of
Yeah.
this policy.
And I completely agree with the sentiments of that, and I understand the necessity for it, absolutely.
All right, so then we end with any revisions to this oversight committee policy must be adopted in accordance with the Administrative Procedure Act and by a supermajority vote by the board. I just want to make sure that's clear. So whenever this comes about and we have a vote, changes in policy need supermajority. Am I correct?
Yes, through the chair, thank you. You are correct on that.
So you should,
It's
Yes.
not in our
I would say
bylaws.
we would want to
It's not
specify
defined in our
majority plus one.
bylaws.
Pardon?
It's not defined in our bylaws.
I
Just
just
question, Ms.
defined it.
Rosario, when you wrote that one about mascot, supermajority, what did you mean? Just for my
I put
information.
supermajority, which means one past
Simple majority.
the simple majority.
That's what
right?
Dr. Posca said. yeah.
But that was what I added for that particular policy.
We can
For
define it.
this one, you might say, as an example, this policy can only be changed with a full
Unanimous.
unanimous vote. You know, you can change it any way that you want. If you don't define what that is,
Wow.
yeah.
So,
irrelevant.
but right now, it says supermajority, is if there's any changes. And I think we've all talked about this. Again, I don't want to have this be a catch-22, or I gotcha, or a game.
There's no gotcha.
So I would say.
4 out of 5 would have to agree to changes in this policy.
100%.
Am I correct, Dr. Moore?
My recommendation is include the same language as you have in 2 other places in your policy.
Yeah, just define it.
Majority plus 1. So
That's
we
what
just
it
add that.
I would be okay with a unanimous vote. Either that or supermajority, that's defined.
Supermajority. But that's what it says already.
Here's
Oh, we're
where
just defining
I have an issue with that. I'll tell you why, because when we have special meetings, we had a special meeting, I don't know, there was a special meeting called last year, I think it was, whenever it was. And only 3 board members were there. It was you, Dr., Ms. Berenborg, and.
Brian Barefoot.
And Brian
Yep.
Barefoot. And when you have only 3, to assume that you would have a unanimous vote on something is just, I think it's unfair, because you don't know what may happen. You know, what comes before you, you might not agree with a particular paragraph that's in the policy, or whatever it is. So I think that could be tricky, and that could be unfair. I just think that it should be thought, you know, you should really think these things through in that particular case. And again, it's not defined in our bylaws.
Committee policy must be, I'm just looking at this policy now. If you make any changes, which we're looking to do, and we've discussed some of the concerns or questions or agreement, in order to change it, you need a supermajority vote by the board. I just, you know, I know we could say, well, we haven't defined it, whatever, but I think we all know that it means 4 out of 5 on this board. I mean, all righty, did we need a,
Just a question, and I hear your statement, I agree with it. Would we not want to specify, relative to what Ms. Rosario just said, would
Well,
we
we've
not
al-
want to specify a
Supermajority.
supermajority of, majority plus 1 of the full board membership? Because that does exclude the possibility that 3 people in a meeting could have a unanimous decision, but override this.
Yeah.
well, here's the thing, though. It's already in policy. Somebody help me here. This is in policy. We're making changes to the policy. So when it comes to a vote for the changes in the policy, it must be adopted within the Administrative Procedure Act and a supermajority vote by the board. That's what it says. Am I correct? Dr. Moore, okay.
Currently.
All right, that's all I want to say. That's what it says here. Now,
But in
if
terms
we're
of,
looking to make changes, we need a supermajority vote.
so the question is, would you want it to protect the integrity of it? Would you want it to be defined as a majority plus 1 of the board membership, rather than?
Simple majority plus 1 vote.
Simple majority plus 1.
So you're talking about, like, if one person isn't here, they can't vote, or?
Oh, no, simple
Because
majority
Ms.
plus 1.
Berenborg is here.
A
you
simple
know.
majority plus 1 of the board membership means that if a special meeting of 3 people gather together, they do not have sufficient members
I
to make
don't know.
that change.
I just-
It's based on the quorum. It's based
I
on
don't-
who
I don't
shows
know.
up.
I
It's
just-
50, it's simple majority of the quorum present.
But it doesn't have to be. I'm saying it could be based on
The full.
of the full membership,
Yeah.
which precludes
Yeah, you
your
could-
issue that 3 people could gather together and be a majority.
Dr. Moore?
So
Yeah.
I would just,
You could do
I think
that.
what I'm hearing is
You could
include
do anything you
language, though all board members are present, and it needs to be a supermajority,
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5.
That's
What if
not-
all board members are not present?
Can't vote on it.
Then you can't vote on
You
it?
can't vote on it.
Put it right
No,
in.
if you're not
Well, you
present,
can-
you can't vote.
You have, at least 4 members have to be present. And you need to vote of at least 4.
All right, say that one more time, and I'm not gonna,
I would, look at mine looking at me like I'm crazy.
no.
This policy, they're the board, they can do whatever they want.
But see,
If we-
Dr. Moore, the thing is, we should always make sure our public's aware. You
And
know what I
I
mean? This is an
wholeheartedly-
action item. This was an
No,
action item.
I agree, and I think, to me, if you kept the language consistent as you did in the other items, it simply replicate that language, which says something 3 plus 1, correct?
Majority plus 1.
Majority plus 1.
Simple.
Okay.
Would be just to use the same language that you have in your other two to define what a supermajority is, and that will keep it consistent against your policies. And I do think, you can get into hypotheticals, but usually you have 4 or 5 members present,
we're
in
here.
which case, it's going to end up being supermajorities for.
So would you say that to
Of
me, so I
5.
can put that down here? What does it say in the other policy exactly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
What it says in the other policy is that, as used in this policy, the term supermajority vote shall mean 1 vote more than a simple majority vote of a quorum present.
What if there are 4? You can't vote then? Is that what you
If
said,
there's
Dr. Poskett?
4 present, then the supermajority would be 4. Something else I was wondering if you wanted to define in here is when you say you added group based on socioeconomic status, but that wasn't really defined, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to define it by, like, participation in free and reduced lunch, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to also just look at the categories, if you're adding categories, if you wanted to look at the categories that you're adding in terms of who the group's going to be looking at
What are you
for the
talking about?
achievement gap.
That's under board commitment, where it says individual student subgroups based on race, ethnicity, and economic.
Well, the subgroups are defined in the state as
I
far
would just
as-
clean that as
yeah.
an economically disadvantaged, which is the subgroup that I think we're
Okay.
trying to reference.
But economically you might have a student who is not economically disadvantaged and still falls within the academic achievement gap. Then you're excluding those students.
But you'd have a subgroup of that? I mean, this is not individuals, but you're talking about a subgroup?
No, because, I'm talking subgroups. I mean, then you're excluding a certain group from looking at the achievement gap. Not every student is economically disadvantaged. Or
Dr. Moore, yeah.
not every student receives free and reduced lunch, but still are academically challenged. It really should be based on achievement.
Underachieving.
I'll let Dr. Moore and his committee or team look at
Right.
that.
Dr. Moore?
So, can I?
Dr.
add
Posca?
So it probably does make, in Molly's recommendation, it does make sense to probably retool a little bit that paragraph regarding different subgroups and the wording. I would try to leave it a little bit open-ended for room for groups that maybe you didn't think about, as well as I would try to include a special need class as well, because that's one of the big ones that across the country has the biggest achievement gaps. But you could probably, we want to look at underachievement in different subgroups, but we don't necessarily have to name every subgroup. You can say a list of subgroups, including but not limited to, but I would add special needs or the appropriate legal definition of that, which I'm probably not stating.
So can you repeat that? You would add special groups?
So you look at
Special needs.
underachievement in groups, and you can list some, including, I would add special needs.
Including but not limited to.
And yeah, including but not limited to. You can create a generic term that allows the committee, because ultimately the goal is to empower this committee to go look and see through the data what they can do to improve things. And they're gonna find things that maybe were not realized and maybe help come up with solutions for them. So I would leave some open-endedness to that directive.
All righty, I think we wrapped that one up. Thank you very much, board members.
Can
I
I
think-
ask, can I ask if our other board member has any comments? Because it is obviously a supermajority vote. And right now, we just have a no comment. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have an opinion on the work we're doing over here?
I thought we weren't going to talk about that opinion.
About what?
I mean, you said you really can't ask people what
No,
they're
he's saying,
thinking.
does she have comments, like when
can
you
ask.
say, Doctor, when you
Oh,
went to
okay,
each one of
just on
us,
this.
He's
Does she
saying,
have-
does she have any comments?
I'm sorry, I thought you were
Do
going
have
into the
comment?
vote. Yeah. Ms. Berenberg, are you there? Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I heard, I think I heard, because the volume's going up and down here, that Ms. Rosario said when she wrote one of the policies that she talked about supermajority, that she meant when she wrote the policy that it meant one vote more than a majority. So my question is, you wrote this one or helped write it. What was your thought when you were writing it, what a supermajority is?
I didn't have a thought then about the supermajority until right now. Does that matter?
So,
I mean, it
no, I'm
doesn't
asking
really
Dr.
matter.
I'm
It doesn't-
asking Dr.
I don't think it really
Jones.
matters what I thought about it in 2022. I think what matters is what's before us in discussion now in 2024.
Right, well, like I said, it's going up and down in the volume, so I'm only catching a little bit sometimes
Got it.
of what's being said in detail.
Got it.
So I'm asking Dr. Jones, what was her thought on what the supermajority was when this was put forward to the board
Oh,
before?
4 out of 5. That's just 4 out of 5.
Okay, thank you.
I never thought anything else. All right, good discussion, board. Now, we've
I-
got 2 more items that were added. Do we-
Madam.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Chair, I think it sounds like this would actually be a pretty good policy, once it's revised and brought back to us. But I think at that point, Dr. Jones, I don't think that taking off the table something else, I see Dr. Moore shaking his head. I wouldn't take off the table something else to do exactly what is intended for us to address the desegregation order, the joint plan. If we can create something that actually just captures the work without saying things that we're going to do in the future, just saying our commitment is and what our commitment is, I think you'd like it. I think you'd like it, I would like it, but it doesn't get confused with all this other stuff that should be happening right now that isn't. Or that is, but it's not actually captured that way.
Are you
So
thinking as an
I-
addition to this?
Separate and apart from this.
Separate resolution?
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be a resolution, could be a policy
So-
to make sure that we will never end up in,
Along those same lines, and this is October, November, whenever, if the board approves these changes, I will bring something, whether it's a resolution or whether it's another policy, to capture what the intent of this specific policy is. And I don't
Good.
think any one board member doesn't agree with what the intent of this specific policy. It's a different path that some agree with and some don't. But if we just took the action you all discussed today, then by default, you've kind of left the intent of this policy. So I don't think that's the actual desire of any one board member. So goes to public hearing, comes back, I'd have to problem solve to determine what is the most appropriate thing, whether it's a resolution, to give the assurances to the community, the NAACP, that this is an ongoing priority, not to have a regression or going back to the way that it was. So it
Correct.
is, I think you really have to do both, if that's the action the board wants to take.
Right. And I go back to what Dr. Posca said, and I've said it from day one. This was written so we just don't put it on the shelf. It was a lot of detail, a lot of work, and that was our main intent. That's always been the main intent. And I thought that's pretty unique for a school district, but we are unique. Okay, do we need a break before the joint work group, school board employee, or can we keep
I think
rolling?
discussed that. Keep rolling.
Okay.
what was
Ms.
that?
Rosario,
Was that
joint,
yes?
you have the next
Do you need to
agenda
take a
item.
break?
I'm okay.
He made a face.
Okay, Ms. Rosario, go ahead. Joint work group, school board employee.
No,
Appointee.
appointee.
I'm sorry, I put employee.
That's okay. All right, let me get so it's not too far off from what we're talking about. Let me give you all 2, 3, take one of each. I'm going to give one to the superintendent. I'll walk through this with you.
We'll wait for you.
I think it sounds like we're taking a break. I'm gonna go, I'm running too. I'm going.
Maybe we should take a break.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're going to take a break.
She
We
said
need
you-
to,
you
Dr.
can-
Moore, take a break. Dr. Moore,
In the absence of the work group or the
Yeah.
you just,
vice chair?
you have a mic.
yeah, just, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
We'll take a 5-minute recess.
Item with Ms. Rosario.
Okay, so I've been giving some thought to the position of the board assigned or and appointed by the board to the work group committee. The IRC, the SDIRC NAACP work group committee, work group, not committee, work group, the joint work group. And I went back to our April 22nd agenda, which you have in front of you. It should be the first item that you have in front of you. I just highlighted that area where we have the appointment of, the latest appointment of the school board member to the work group. So I just, in full transparency, wanted to bring that to you. This work group, the next item that I gave you is the actual court order that determined that the joint work group, the current joint work group, would replace the previous equity committee. So again, in full transparency, I'm giving that to you. This was approved and adopted March 14th, 2022. And the next document that I gave you was the establishment and the makeup of the work group. So the work group establishment, which again was approved March 14th, 2022, is established with the approval of the court, the Indian River County branch of National Association, or the NAACP, and the School District of Indian River County shall establish a work group that will replace the former equity committee. It indicates the purpose of the work group, the composition of the work group here, which is important because the composition of the work group is different than what was the composition for the equity committee. It's slightly different. So here you have 4 members appointed by the NAACP, 3 members appointed by the superintendent, and 1 school board representative. The frequency on the other side, the frequency of meetings, this is something Dr. Moore, I'm glad he corrected. The work group will convene once a month upon agreement by the parties to the litigation, to shift the responsibility to monitor compliance with the joint plan from the previously established equity committee to the IRC NAACP. It's kind of written. Within 30 days of written joint agreement, the parties will convene and establish a monthly meeting, and then so on and so forth, as you can see there, the responsibilities, the obligations, dispute resolution, and the effective date. It says under effective date, the provisions of this joint plan work group will become effective upon the court's approval, which again occurred on March 14th, and related as a related amendment to the 2018 joint plan, but it doesn't replace all the other things in the 2018 joint plan. Everything else stays the same except the composition of this work group. And so I gave it some thought because the old equity committee, I don't want to say, the equity committee that was established with the joint plan was created and actually indicates that the committee members on the equity committee would meet once, would actually be revoted on. It's a position to be held once a year. Every year you would re-vote on that position. The work group does not establish that. There is no time limit for this work group. And unfortunately, this was not brought to my attention when we were having these discussions back in April, and I brought the item for us to vote on a current board member, and what was actually on there, which I didn't put on, it probably was the superintendent or somebody from his team who actually put on there that this position would come back to us for a vote in November, which is next month. in 2 months. But it's supposed to, there is no time limit. So there isn't an indication on the court documents that actually say that it's only a 6-month position or a 1-year position or a 2-year position. Dr. Jones sat on this committee, more than 2 years? And then prior to that, you sat on the equity committee, and it never came to us for,
I was never on the equity committee.
you sat on the equity committee.
I did not sit on the equity committee. I was in the audience on the equity
Okay.
committee.
And it never came to us for a vote in 6 months or in 3 years. Neither did any of those come to us for a vote at our organizational meeting. I would argue that this position is very different from any other committee position that we volunteer to sit on because this is guided by litigation. And because it is so fluent, it can end tomorrow, or it can end, like we've talked about, in 5, 10, or 20 years. And so for that matter, I was thinking about how things change so quickly, and we don't have a policy to address these kinds of changes because it is a lawsuit and because it is so fluid. Obviously, the most obvious glaring difference is the composition of the equity group, which changed by court order to be the work group. So I recommend that we take a look at adopting a resolution that kind of addresses some of this. Doesn't tie us into a policy, but it does kind of clarify things for us moving forward, since this is all fairly new, right? Dr. Jones was the only one who sat on the committee up until we had a new vote in April. So the next item that I gave you is a drafted resolution. And again, it's just a drafted resolution that I put together. And so I am going to ask the board's support on this, but I'm totally open, obviously, to hearing, your feedback on it. So the resolution actually is a resolution of the School Board of Indian River County, Florida, to commit and establish protocols for the appointment, and this is not addressing the work group or the joint plan or anything like that. This is only talking about board position on the work group. That's it. Establish protocols for the appointment of the school board members to the current joint work group or possibly renamed future committee, work group, or otherwise determined by the court. Whereas the School Board of Indian River County, Florida School Board and the Indian River County branch of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People will work collaboratively and cooperatively towards the shared goal of achieving a fully desegregated school system under the matter styled, and there's the very, very simple, there's the case. Whereas, while the parties agree that the school district is already entitled to a declaration of partial unitary status, by the way, this was taken directly from the joint plan, in the areas of facility, non-instructional staff, and administrative staff, other areas remain to achieve full unitary status, including strategies for recruitment of African-American teachers, representation of African-American teachers and instructional staff, student assignments, transportation, and extracurricular. Only the items that were taken directly from the joint plan. Whereas in furtherance of this goal, the school board created an equity committee that reported directly to the school board and was responsible for monitoring and documenting compliance with the 2018 desegregation order and for making recommendations to the board. And whereas on March 8th, sorry, that should be March 14th, the parties reached agreement on a plan for a joint work group. So essentially just saying we did have an equity committee, now we have the work group. And whereas the school board agreed and appointed Dr. Jones to represent the school board on, I don't have that date, the length of time was not established, which we know. As a result, Dr. Jones served in this position until April of 2024. So again, nothing controversial, just facts. Whereas on April 22nd, a new vote was held by the school board to appoint a new school board member, me, to represent the school board on the 2022 joint work group as provided by the joint expedited motion for clarification, and of course the court order that you have in front of you. Whereas the joint work group has yet to meet since I was appointed on April 22nd, 2024. Now therefore, I should take that and out. Now therefore be it resolved, and this is what I'm asking for support on. Now therefore be it resolved, the School Board of Indian River County in public meeting duly called and assembled. 1, the school board is committed to compliance with the goals outlined in the 2018 joint plan. Dr. Moore, that's probably right there, you know, a good resolution, just simply stated. 2, the school board acknowledges this position only on the work group, nothing else. This position is not like other volunteer community committees which renew appointments once a year at the board organizational meeting in November. The school board affirms that this position is ordered by the court to be a full year position. Oh, that's not true, got to take that out. Take out number 3. 4, the school board affirms that Jacqueline Rosario would remain the school board member assigned and appointed to the joint work group until November 2025. So I'm asking, because we haven't met at all, to allow a year, since no meeting has yet to be held since appointment in April of 2024. The school board affirms that beginning November 2025, future school board member appointments shall be held for 1-year terms and must be made by official action at the annual organizational meeting held every November. And the school board believes that the timely provision of resources, support, instruction, and interventions based upon students' individual needs, as well as the establishment of the diverse workforce representative of all students is critical to achieving successful outcomes. So really, you know, in thinking about this, in order for us, since so many people like fair and equitable, to be fair in, you know, just so that we can kind of establish some protocols on this, only this position. So that's what I'm asking for support on. What do you all think?
If I remember correctly, we inadvertently kind of created this problem by not voting in a new member to the group in our November organizational meeting. So then you got voted in out of cycle in April.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know how, but I guess the work group hasn't met yet. It certainly would violate the spirit and intent of what we were trying to do to change you out in November. The only other alternative I would recommend would be to leave you in for a year through April. But then we're at a cycle with our organizational meeting. Personally, I don't mind letting you just go till the next organizational meeting of 2025. I think it's reasonable. I think the only reasonable alternative would be an April change.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Ms. Berenborg, can you hear or do you have any comments? I always forget
I'm not sure how I want to comment on this. I think that in November, we choose the people that are representing us for lots of different things. I think when we had a board member appointed by the governor and that changed, let's face it, the majority on the board, all of a sudden we want to change things. I have a really hard time with that. The voters have spoken. I think in November is the time to do it.
Mr. McDonald?
How do you make that political?
I agree with Dr. Posca. The assumption is that the work group might meet before April of next year. And having appointed Ms. Rosario, she should have the opportunity to serve on that committee. So I agree with the idea of the resolution.
Thank you.
Can I add something? In response to what the other member said, I think it's a big distortion of the facts and reality to say that another member coming on the board is what changed them when we forgot to follow our own policy in changing that person in November and voting on it. So we failed to literally follow what was written in our policy, and then we were confronted with it in April at a cycle. That was the initiating factor. I think it's a distortion of reality to blame Governor DeSantis in excluding those facts.
Thank you. The policy with the reorganization, with the committees and chair and vice chair, you're going to have to remind me, does it say this committee also? I didn't think it did.
No.
Okay, so it wasn't in there.
No, it
No.
it didn't exist.
Okay, right. Okay, well, and I remember when I was voted on, I was 22, and I remember Mr. Barefoot said something, and I agreed, and Dr. Schiff and Ms. Berenborg, so I was at the meetings anyway, because I did attend, but, so I don't think that's in our organizational policy at that time. I agree a little bit with Dr. Posca on the April time, as far as doing that, and does this resolution, would that affect anything through the judge? I'm just asking. Do you think, Dr. Moore? I'm trying to think. I know we choose, but I have to look back at that entire joint plan.
I think the judge's concern that would be is that there's a representative from the board.
Okay.
We told her there would be a representative from the board.
Correct.
It's our responsibility to figure out how that representative is identified.
Okay, and then that beginning November 2025, whether we go April or November, future board appointment should be held for one-year terms, must be made by official action. I can agree with that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is just internal. It's not anything that will alter, the judge's order or anything like that. I do appreciate it for your support and for the fairness in it. I thank you. I have not, by the way, just again, in complete transparency, I have not handed it over to Ms. Shattuck yet, for legal sufficiency. I will do that, and with the board consensus, we can have that done and then post it on the next agenda.
And again, we
Appreciate it.
would have
Thank
to
you.
talk about whether it be April or November.
Oh, we could do that now.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can talk about it now.
Well, I agree with the April. I don't know. I'm agreeing with the April to April, but,
We'd be out of cycle. then.
yeah, well,
You're-
you also said that.
No, so we could do that, but then we'd be out of cycle.
Yeah, we
and
would
we'd
be.
We'd have a random appointment in like in
You
April.
have to remember.
Yeah.
And you have the
Do
added
we want to
addition.
do it? I mean, I don't know if it's worth, I don't know if it's worth it, you know what I mean?
We'll just have the attorney look at it, and then we could bring it back.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be out of cycle. I think every board member should serve on this. I really do. I think you get a little bit more of the history, a little bit more of the, if you really, really go back in history, how it started in Sharpton versus the school district, 1964, where we've come and where we're going to go. Yes, sir.
Through the judge, just through a management perspective, we missed this timeline because it wasn't within cycle. So
Yeah.
I would encourage us to eventually get back on cycle.
Got it.
Well,
Thank-
we have never been on cycle.
I know, but-
But you mentioned what didn't exist. It did, because it had existed for 2 years. It had existed for 2 years prior, since.
Which is why we've, as written, this puts us back on cycle. Pushing it up to April is
Confusing.
Throws us off.
creates the potential for this mistake to happen again because
Right.
it's in April versus that. So I would just encourage you to get us back to November. This puts us back to November. If you did it in April, maybe that's fine too, but in April, I would encourage the board to say, all right, we're going to get from April to November. So in November 2025, we are back on cycle and we no longer have to worry about this. That's the only point I'm making.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Shattuck shaking your head. Do you want to add anything, or it's good? All good?
Just agreeing with everybody, you know, you have your policy on the reorganization meeting, and that's when you make all of your appointments. And so I think it makes sense to do it at the same time at
Okay.
your November reorganization.
Thank you. I
meeting.
appreciate that. Thank you, board members. All
Okay,
right.
Ms. Rosario, superintendent contract.
Yes. Okay, let me just put this away. Yeah. Oh, all right. So the superintendent's contract. So obviously, the only time that we can talk is when we are in a meeting. And I gave it quite a bit of thought the last time that we talked about the superintendent's contract. And I read his contract in full, as I have in the past. I do encourage you all to read it. If you can pull it up online, it is on board docs, should be on board docs. There is one place in there, and it was one of those comments that was made, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear as to the understanding of this. One of the recommendations that the superintendent, or that paper that the superintendent, I don't know if he gave this to you all on the recommendations, rather the comparison of other school districts, of Martin County actually, and Indian River County here. There was something on here, there's an asterisk that says, on average, all elected Florida district superintendents received a salary increase of 20.9%, approximately $32,115 for the 24-25 school year. But we don't have that average yet. And then I started to think, why would he even mention elected when he's not an elected superintendent? So I went into his contract, and there is a section here, I would say it's page 7 into 8. And it reads, in addition to the base salary, so really this is just bringing up for clarity and for question, for clarity rather. In addition to the base salary provided in subparagraph A, which would be whatever the base salary he gets, the superintendent shall receive an annual performance salary incentive from the board in the amount provided for elected superintendents pursuant to sections 1001.47, 4, and 5, Florida statutes, so long as the superintendent has successfully completed all the phases of the program as described in the statutory section and demonstrated successful performance as determined by the Florida Department of Education, which we talked about because the superintendent said that he completed those, that certification, which we haven't received the email, by the way. You said you were going to send us Manny Diaz's email.
Oh, I did. You mean a second time? I can do that.
So I just want to be clear that this does, so, and then with what he provided, what you provided here, Dr. Moore, I just want to be clear that the assumption isn't that you would, in addition, get the difference of last year's elected official salary and this year's elected official salary. You're not getting that difference in addition. This is actually specifically talking to just the certification program that you went through.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to be clear on that because I know that we talked about letting some conversation happen with regard to administrators' salaries and contracts, and then we would talk about your contract or, whatever would be due to you by contract. But, so I just want to be clear on that. So this Florida statute only talks about the certification requirements and then that differential for the performance of that phased program.
Correct.
Okay. Not the difference in elected salaries.
Correct.
Okay. So then why add that here? Because you completely threw me off. Just as information or?
Well, to acknowledge that the state of Florida, as it shifts statute, has recognized the need to appropriately compensate elected superintendents. They have the authority, they're the ones who provide that compensation. They have acknowledged we need to drastically enhance the compensation for elected superintendents. That's the sole reason. Because
Okay.
if the state of Florida can acknowledge the need to increase individuals' pay by 21%, that's just a clear example of acknowledging the work of those elected superintendents.
Okay. So moving forward, this section is done then, essentially. You've completed the program, you've got the certification.
Yes, there's nothing more to do there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And we didn't meet this week.
We'll be back on schedule. I will send you that specific letter. I was waiting for, which I should have this week or next week, because that is retro. So sheriffs got their 21%, tax collectors got their 21%. They're on a different pay cycle than superintendents. So superintendents will, as well board members, get their compensation sometime this month, which will be retroactive to the beginning of our fiscal year,
Was that 21%?
What are
which
you
is
talking
July
about?
1. No, you guys are not
down.
getting 21. I don't know what you're getting at.
We
It's
went
not-
down.
Once I have that information, I'll provide that to the board for this fiscal year. So we're no longer talking about an average. We're talking about this is the specific amount. all
The
the
salary schedule?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That comes sometimes this week or next week.
Oh, I understand.
And
You
then
threw me
from
off.
there, my intent is to engage board members regarding compensation.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good. That's it. I just wanted to clarify and make sure if there were any issues, then we could have this conversation here.
Just one little point, again, conversations we've had, the elected official 21%, and then you said at one time your salary is at the bottom two of those elected officials? I'm sorry, superintendents?
Yes, if appointed superintendents, as of today, I'm the second lowest, but after tomorrow, when there's a board meeting, I'll be the lowest. Highest performing, lowest compensated.
Okay, and you will roll over, you will get what the administrators get. I mean, that's part of your contract. And what percent was that? I'm sorry.
It'll be between 3 and 4%.
3 and 4%. Okay, yeah. Thank you for bringing this up, Ms. Rosario. We've got to meet with the superintendent and then get some things rolling.
That's because you do great with less, right? You do more
I
with
was
less.
saying we're getting a bargain.
Yeah,
No,
that's what you say all the time.
We do, but in all honesty, I am a husband and I'm a father, and I have to protect my family.
and Dr. Moore, and again, I'm glad Ms. Rosario brought this up because we've talked individually, but that's important to know because when I was at the FHSA, the superintendents used to meet up in Gainesville. A lot of people didn't stay as a superintendent. They would rotate. I think the average is 3 years, 4 years maybe, but yeah, we have to commit to you like you do to this district. So I'm glad Ms. Rosario brought it up. Any other comments before we
I guess
close out?
my last comment is, we don't want our superintendent being the lowest paid in the state,
Thank you.
especially when you're probably unreplaceable. Like, I'm always interested in finding somebody better. That's just the way my mind works. However, I don't think it can be done. That's the problem.
That's a
So
good
like, I think we do need to discuss potential, I think we do need to discuss potentially, I don't know what the best strategy is, but improving the base pay with a contract negotiation may make the most sense.
He's up for next year.
Yeah, but we could decide to do that
Oh my
like next
gosh.
week. I think that's the best thing to do. I would, if I were him, I would probably already have a new job somewhere.
Sure
I'd
you
find a new district that needed me, that was in the bottom.
That could
They'd pay me a
get up.
bunch of money, and I'd make that district amazing and help a lot of kids.
It
It would
sounds
be a
to-
win-win.
Are you asking him to?
No, I'm just saying that
slow it
we
down.
It's the
don't
truth.
want him thinking that.
That's the truth.
That's just the reality of it. There's a lot of districts that need help, especially with all the board changes in the state that have happened the last
Yep.
2 to 4 years. If I were him, I would probably be looking at a new job. And I don't think we want him
We don't
looking at a
want
new job. I think we should consider raising the base pay. I don't think a 3 to 4% bonus is appropriate.
And when you think about that,
And a bonus also, I don't know how you get taxed on your bonus, but do you get a higher tax rate on the bonus, or does it go straight to your salary
Get
in
a
the same
bonus.
way? or-
I
No,
don't have a
there's,
bonus.
It doesn't
I
get-
don't receive a bonus, but the
It's
key
withheld
as a-
salary.
is to incorporate it into your base salary,
Right.
because
Right.
the average of your 5 years is basically what I'll spend the rest of my life living on.
Right.
And-
It's all in his contract, all the details,
But I think it's a
including
better-
travel, because he gets $800 a month in travel
I get it.
expenses
Hey, I get
and.
it. I get
Yep.
it. At the end of the day, we just don't want him to be in the lower quartile of superintendents paid, because he's
And-
clearly one of the
Yeah.
best. And if he leaves, we're not going to
Agree.
be able to find anyone even close to replace him. I doubt it. It would be a miracle.
and when we keep him, we keep our team, that's working
Right.
so hard each and
No,
every day.
I think we should have a serious conversation. about it.
I'm ready. Put on the other.
So,
Anything else? And just a reminder, before we adjourn, we will meet at 5:01 for the millage and final budget with Mr. Green. Thank you, everybody.
all
The
right. That's
Adjournment
Monday Night Football too,
3:37.
sir.